What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Godlike Naruto Ems Rinnegan? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, currently I'm 16, still a mere genin, and yet here I am facing the very person who had just destroyed the village I loved, killed Kakashi-sensei, Shizune-chan and countless other people. Me, a mere genin, stood across from what could possibly be the strongest shinobi of all time. Well, that's if he weren't crippled, forced to use bodies as puppets and separate his abilities amongst them. I defeated each of those bodies: Tendo, Diva Path, Chikushodo, Animal Path, Gakido, Preta Path, Ninjendo, Human Path, Shirado, Asura Path, and the last of the 6 paths, Jigokudo, Naraka Path. To simply put, it was the hardest fight of my young life, and I have no doubt it's only going to get harder. One good thing that came out of that battle: I now know of my father, Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, the man I'd always looked up to. Luckily, I have more up my sleeve than just Rasengan and its variations, Sennin Modo, Sage Mode, and Kage Bunshin, Shadow Clones. When I was just 13, Arrow Sennin took me away from the village to train me, to make me stronger to defend myself and my precious people from Akatsuki and anyone else that wished to harm them. When he told me we were leaving for 2.5 years, I was excited as any growing shinobi would be, knowing they were going to be getting stronger and learning powerful jutsu. However, things went differently. Instead of training to use jutsu, I had to make my body stronger, physically. Obviously, being young, at the time, I complained, I wanted to know flashy stuff. Arrow Sennin though had explained what we were going to be doing in the time I was with him. He told me he had originally planned to just build my strength, speed, resilience, chakra control, taijutsu and maybe Kyuubi's chakra. I had been about to complain at the time, but thankfully before I could, Arrow Sennin had further explained. After Sasuke's betrayal, he had changed how he was going to train me, since I had more than just Akatsuki to deal with. Instead of just those aspects of a shinobi, he had decided to fill me up with ninjutsu to make me the best I can ever be. So for those years and the 6 months, my taijutsu was improved to the point that I could go toe-to-toe with Arrow Sennin and only come away with a few bruises. It wasn't perfect at the time, but then I knew I could still improve it. My speed had increased beyond even Arrow Sennin's expectations. Well, that's what he told me. I could simply vanish from one spot and appear a good distance away using my newfound speed, Arrow Sennin, and I had decided to call it Shunpo, Flash Step. Ninjutsu, on the other hand, which is still my favorite aspect, had grown leaps and bounds. I found out my nature affinity were Futon, Wind Release, Raiden, Lightning Release, and Suiden, Water Release. However, in the time limit we had, we couldn't master each of them. Arrow Sennin had recommended training with Raiden and Suiden at the time, which I had fully mastered by the time I came home. I learned, mastered and even creating some of my own jutsu in those 2.5 years. Some could be considered even S rank, which I was entirely pleased with, knowing I had created such strong jutsu. Though, Arrow Sennin had told me that when we returned home that I should keep it all a secret, to only show so much. He hadn't wanted Akatsuki or anyone else to find out just how strong I really was. When I'd asked him how strong I was, he had truthfully told me I was at least mid-high rank. In the end I agreed to only show a little of what I could do, though at times I hated it. Aside from training, I had grown in the time away from the village, becoming more of an adult. Perhaps saying it to myself sounds like I'm boasting or over-exaggerating, but either way it's true. I became more mature, looking at the world for what it was, not the naive way I had forced myself to live due to how I had grown up under the hateful glares of the villagers. During the training trip, we had ended up in Suna, which I was happy to see Gaara after a long time. At that time though, he was just a chunin, so finding out he was Cage once I returned was a greater shock to me. Anyway, while in Suna I relaxed for a short time, getting to know Gaara much better, teaching him more about the world since he had been cut off from a lot in his time as a killer. In that time though, I got closer to Temari, Gaara's sister. Even back then I couldn't deny her beauty, her simple grace and how she held herself with pride as a kunoichi even when some looked down upon them. She was never afraid to speak her mind. She was blunt, honest and deadly, a combination I like in a woman. It was at that time I had realized I had become more mature. I wasn't afraid to tell her she was beautiful like I would have been before I had left with Jiraiya. Seeing a person like Temari who didn't show too much emotion blush made more bolder, more honest and overall more confident, the very thing I needed in life. She was also the woman I had lost my virginity to. It wasn't some drunken accident, or a case of, why not? It was because I liked her and she had admitted she liked me over time. Eros Sennin and I had spent 2 weeks in Suna, or rather I did while he went of information gathering. I was 14 at the time, a young time too for some to lose their virginity, I know. In the second week, Temari had told me she liked me, as more than a friend. I had been shocked that someone so beautiful would even like me, but hey, I wasn't complaining. She had gone on further explaining that she was attracted to my strength, both as a shinobi and person. To her I was the hero who saved her little brother from becoming a monster for life. I had denied her claim and told her I was no hero, but she shut me with a kiss. A kiss that had truly shut me up. Even when it ended, I wasn't proud of my mind blanking on me or my brain stopping from functioning back then. Seeing her once more in Konoha though after I'd returned had ignited that fire within me that burned for me to touch her, to taste her lips on mine and to simply ravish her on the spot if I had to. After that meeting with Tsunade, on the way out Temari had slipped me a note of where she was staying in Konoha and to meet her that night. It was torture having to wait all day to see her, but when I did, it was worth it. We'd made love all night long, and even into the morning, and yes, I mean love. Before she had left the village to go back to Suna, we'd had that talk about us. We ended up agreeing we would be together. She admitted she loved me and I too admitted I loved her. The time in Suna had helped each of us understand that, especially when we weren't with each other. Seeing her again after so long had cemented that feeling, leaving me with no doubt of how I'd felt. Yes, a long-distance relationship was difficult, more than that even, but through summons we had kept in touch after getting Gaara back. Even now, as I stand before Nagato, thinking of what to answer him with, I long to touch her. Just to simply hold her delicate fingers between mine, her blonde locks to brush against my face as we hug, kiss and lie in bed together. But no, if I want that peace, I have to make sure I survive in this hellish world that had given me so many enemies. Anyway, getting back to my true abilities. For the entire time I was back in Konoha, from Gaara's kidnapping, awesome as death, mastering my futon, completing futon, Rasen Shuriken and even Peens, no, Nagato's attack on the village, I kept my true abilities hidden. I hated lying to all of my friends, Kakashi-sensei and Yamato Taicho, especially when they helped me with my futon. I had wanted to tell them I could use 2 other elements, that I could similar jutsu to Chidori and Reikuri, but I was too afraid that if I did, then people I don't want to know may find out, like Danzo. So I had to play dumb, act like I was still stupid despite the fact that over the time away from Konoha I had become much smarter from working on strategy. The only time I didn't play dumb was when Pa and Ma taught me how to use Senjutsu chakra. All of that I had no idea about. Eros Sennin had mentioned there were many types of chakra before and I had believed him obviously, but I had never asked what those various chakra were. If I had, maybe I could have learned to use Senjutsu chakra before. The feel of being connected to the earth was unlike anything else. It felt pure, more pure than anything I had ever felt before. Now though, after listening to Nagato speak about his past and coming to realizations on my own, I had to show everyone who I really am, what I can do, to simply stop playing around. Maybe if I had decided to do so earlier, I could have saved the other Jinchuriki before Akatsuki got them. Shaking my head of such thoughts, I looked back up at Nagato as he continued to speak. Hai no Kuni, a mile away from Konohagakure no Sato. Secluded cave. Just by living people hurt others without realizing it. As long as people live, so too will hatred. There can be no peace in this cursed land. What Jiraiya spoke of was nothing but a fantasy. Nagato had just told Naruto, who was stood across from him, all about his past, what had made him the man he was today. Nagato had told Naruto all about his past. How he, Konan and Yahiko were all just poor orphans in a megacure. He told him about how Jiraiya found them and had trained them in the ninja arts for 3 years. However, it ended when Jiraiya left at the end of the 3rd year. They then proceeded to start a rebellion against Hanzo and all those on his side. However, it all went down the drain when Danzo and the other 2 elders along with all his rude shinobi made an alliance with Hanzo to destroy the rebels. Konoha at the time was neutral with aim during the time of the battle between the rebels and Hanzo. Naruto then realized that Danzo and the elders had performed treason behind the Hokage's back, while Sarutobi was Hokage, while his father was Hokage, and he had no doubt that Danzo was performing treason while Tsunade was in charge. The good thing to Naruto was now he could have proof against him in the form of Nagato and Konan. Nagato then explained that Danzo had taken Konan hostage and ordered one of them to kill the other or she would die. Nagato refused to kill Yahiko, but Yahiko didn't want his friends hurt, so he ended up attacking Nagato and got Nagato to stab him. Yahiko had smiled and gave Nagato one last hug before dying. Nagato had become overcome with rage and attacked the entire army that were there. He was the one who had given Danzo that scar across his eye. He had even killed Hanzo, but his legs were severely damaged. After that, Nagato had made Yahiko his first body, and then he created the Akatsuki to create peace. I lost so many more friends in battle after that. So many friends, so many people kept dying. Everyone in the land of fire crows about peace, but each mission Konoha undertakes funds the war. The people of the land of fire know they are in conflict in the war, yet they hypocritically speak of peace. The peace of the big countries is built on the sacrifices of the little countries. Now you see my reasons. Back in the village I asked you if you had a better solution, do you? Nagato asked. Naruto was silent for a moment. That may be true. He said softly as he pulled out a book with the title, The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja, and remembered Jiraiya's words. I believe the time will come when people truly understand one another. I think you're right, Naruto said, shocking Nagato. Really? Nagato asked with wide-eyed. I understand you, but I still can't forgive you, I still hate you. Then let's finish this, Nagato stated, moving to get out of the machine he was placed in. But, Nagato stopped as Naruto spoke, the blonde's blue eyes fixing him with a gaze filled with so much determination it was almost frightening. That arrow's Sennin believed in me, so I will believe what he believed in. Naruto stopped, his grip tightening around the spine of the book. That's my answer. Nagato's rippled eyes had gotten wider as the blonde spoke. I won't kill you. What is this boy? Konan wondered to herself, staring at the blonde in question with shock and awe. Never before had she seen so much determination in someone's eyes, well, besides Yahiko, that is. You won't kill me? Nagato turned the statement into a question, more for his benefit than anyone else's. The words repeated over in his head, and he couldn't help but wonder how such a young man could be so determined after being given the short end of the stick since the first day of his life. You will believe in what Jiraiya believed in? I see, so that's your answer. He looked at Naruto for a moment before shaking his head with incredulity. So, should we just sit here and wait for you to bring peace to the world? He asked rhetorically as he inclined his head to move forward. Give me a break. How can I believe in Jiraiya now? There's no such thing as real peace. Naruto looked up from the book. It's impossible as long as we're living in this accursed world. Then, Naruto spoke up after a moment, his sage mode still active. I will break the curse. If there's such a thing as peace, I will find it. I won't give up. Nagato's eyes had gotten wider with each word spoken before looking at the young man in bewilderment. Words eluded him as he tried to say what even his mind couldn't place together. Konan looked at her lifelong friend in alar at seeing him so shocked and simply taken aback. Nagato, what's the matter? Those words, Nagato uttered, staring down at the blonde. That's right, those were lines from this. Naruto spoke low, looking down at the book in question. The first book he ever wrote. He wrote this book to change the world. At the end, he says he was inspired by a pupil of his to write this. That was you, Nagato. Nagato looked at him in further shock, his Rinnegan glowing from his emotions. What? Nagato muttered. Is this just a coincidence? Naruto hadn't finished yet though. And the name of the main character is Naruto. Nagato's wide eyes hadn't lessened in their intensity, only rose. So my name is a precious memento of him. I can't just give up on and stomp of this memento. I will become the Hokage, like my father before me. And I'll make sure there's a place for a Megacure too. Believe in me, he almost pleaded at the end. Nagato stared at him for a moment, and for that single moment, he could have sworn he saw Yahiko's translucent figure hovering behind Naruto as if they were one and the same. We studied under the same master. I told you before that we should therefore be able to understand each other. Then, I was just joking, but now, you're an odd kid, you remind me of myself when I was younger. Nagato, Konan whispered to herself, glancing at the red-headed shinobi. I couldn't believe in what Jiraiya believed in. Or, in the man himself. A different path. In you, I can see a different future. Nagato looked up into Naruto's own startled sage eyes. I will believe in you, Naruto Uzumaki? Naruto let out a breath and a weak smile as his sage mode finally ran its course and returned his eyes to their shocking blue color. Thank you, Nagato, he whispered in relief. Naruto Uzumaki. Nagato spoke, gaining the boy in question and Konan's attention. Before I die, there are a couple things I must do. I wish to give you a gift, one that will allow you to bring peace to the world, as you want to. What? Naruto questioned with a confused look. He may have gotten smarter, but at the moment he just couldn't see what Nagato meant. My eyes, the Rinnegan, will be put to better use in your care. Nagato said, drawing a gasp from Konan while Naruto's eyes had gone wide and mouth agape. You have more potential in you than you realize. Just looking at you, I can tell you're stronger than you show or even understand. I don't understand, Naruto told him truthfully. You have power locked away within you. You are of the Namikaze clan, a clan blessed with a Kekkei Genkai, the same one that allowed your former Hokage and father, Minato Namikaze, to create the Hiraishin. Nagato informed the Uzumaki. How do you know who my father is? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. And I don't have a Kekkei Genkai. Like I said, your potential is locked away within you. Most likely due to the seal holding the Kyuubi back, or the Biju itself. Nagato explained. There are more to my eyes than them being a dojutsu. In a way, they are sentient. They hold knowledge, power and the ability to bring change to the world. The Rinnegan's chakra will merge with you, travel through your body and change it to how it should be. You will most likely grow taller, your hair may change, you may gain more muscle. I don't truly know what will change in you. But I do know, it will unlock your potential, give you your true power. Naruto looked at him shocked for a moment at the ability of those eyes that were considered a myth not long ago before blinking. How would you even give me the Rinnegan? He asked, considering its power. After all, power in the right hands could be used for good. Nagato smiled down at him. I will have my Rinnegan implanted within you. It will sense your Uzumaki blood and chakra. And it will bond with your chakra network, your mind, and bring out who you really are. Uzumaki blood and chakra? Naruto questioned before blinking in shock. Then you're an Uzumaki? Yes, Nagato answered with a sad smile. We are distant relatives, at least I believe so. My family had left the Uzumaki homeland before it was destroyed and moved to a megacure. He flinched as he felt his life leaving him, bit by bit. Anyway, back on topic. When I have my eyes transplanted within you, I will be passing along everything my Rinnegan has stored, jutsu, knowledge. You will be able to use jutsu you've never used as if you have used them before. It may get confusing for a while, but over time you will think nothing of it. The transplanting will be painful, I warn you, which is why I must have you be unconscious during the procedure. In that time, your DNA will change, your body will change to how you should look, and you will know everything I do. Naruto looked at Nagato for a moment. Say I agree to have this done, then, will I have to go out and find some dead bodies to share the power I'll possess? He questioned, not wanting to go that far for power. No, Nagato chuckled, shaking his head. I had to do that because when I first used my Rinnegan I used a technique my body wasn't ready for. It left me crippled, unable to use the full capabilities. I was forced to gather bodies, implant part of my power and giving them the Rinnegan to share and split it amongst 6 bodies. You however, have the healing capabilities of a true Uzumaki, the speed of the Namikaze, and you are more powerful than me even now. Should you accept this power, you will be able to use its full powers. Adding in your almost unlimited chakra supply, you will be able to do so much more with it. Your healing abilities will affect the transplantation though, for a short while the Rinnegan will stay permanent, but your healing ability will return them to your original blue ones, allowing you to still use your Sennin Moto and the Rinnegan itself like an Uchiha would use his Sharingan. I wish I could explain more, and teach someone like you along the way, but everything I know, you will soon know. Konan stood off to the side slightly, looking at Nagato with nothing but shock, sadness and pride at having him back to how he used to be, though she knew it would only be a short time. Looking at Naruto, she noticed the determination mixed with anxiety and wariness. If she was correct, she could also see hesitance in accepting the power. Naruto heaved out a huge sigh. I see, and what about this Kekkei Genkai? I was supposed to have gained from my father's side of the family. He knew he could have asked if the man knew who his mother could be since he was also from the Uzumaki clan, but it would most likely be futile. Eros Sennin had told him bits and pieces of his mother but never a name. He had told him how they had a long life expectancy, large chakra reserves, the largest of any clan possible, and tremendous healing capabilities. It explained a lot actually when he had thought about it. Nagato smiled at the young, happy he was considering taking his power that he wished to give the young man. That, you will learn once you accept this power. I'm not holding the information back as a means to force you to accept my gift, but if I look for that information stored with the Rinnegan's knowledge base, it will use the chakra I need for what I must do. Naruto nodded before he blinked at his fellow Uzumaki. Rinnegan's knowledge base? He questioned with curiosity, though he had a pretty good idea what he meant. Yes, that is the place these eyes store information. Words from a book, jutsu, taijutsu styles, even the amount of raindrops you may see fall. Nagato answered. Now, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, will you accept this gift I offer you? Naruto looked down at the book in his hands and instantly knew he had to take the power. While yes, it was a dangerous dojutsu, it was only dangerous to the bearer's enemies, and in this case, it would be Naruto's enemies, namely the Akatsuki and Sasuke Uchiha. He could protect his precious people, especially Temari, with power like that. Looking back at Nagato, he gave a curt nod. I accept. Nagato gave a nod and a smile filled with relief. There is one more thing I wish to give to you, something I have always kept with me. He gave a nod to Konan as he spoke to her. Unseal the weapon, it's time someone finally used it. Konan looked up at him in shock. Are you sure, Nagato? It's been in your family for generations. Naruto looked between the two in confusion. Generations? So it's a family item? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Yes, I'm sure, Konan. Nagato assured his friend with a nod. Turning to Naruto, he gave a nod. Yes, it had been passed through my family generations after generations. It is a weapon from the Uzumaki clan, in other words, and there was little information on it as it had been forged in the era that the Rikudō Sennin was alive. It is known as a Zanpakuto, Soul Slayer. Like many other weapons, it is also sentient. It will only allow those with great strength wield it. So far, there have been none. Its true name isn't even known. I hope that you are able to wield it to its true potential. He explained of the ancient blade. Naruto was riveted by the information. A weapon from his clan, a powerful one at that, being given to him. God, he hoped he could use its power. He hoped it would accept him as its wielder. Konan sighed and reached into a back pocket, pulling out a scroll with a clip on it. Flicking the clip, she knelt to the floor and rolled it out along the ground. On the scroll, the kanji for Zanpakuto was inscribed along it. Biting her thumb to draw blood, she swiped it along the seal, and one poof of smoke later and a sword appeared on top of it. The sword was a work of beauty. It looked like a normal katana with the exception of the guard, which was in the shape of a four-pointed bronze-colored star. Its hilt was light blue and beside it was a dark blue sheath. It's beautiful, Naruto whispered, transfixed by the sword that looked as if it had just been forged. That it is, Nagato commented as he gazed at the weapon. Konan gently picked the sword up and slid it into its sheath with a click before standing up, holding the sword across her hands. Walking across to Naruto, she held the sword out with a frown. In a way, it was like losing a piece of Nagato she always kept. Naruto hesitantly held out his hands to grasp the sword, pulling it from the blue-haired woman's grasp. Sliding his hand along the sheath, he grasped the hilt and gasped as a word, or a name whispered through his mind. Hiranmaru, is that your name? He questioned it. He had been told by Jiraiya and even read up on sentient weapons and how they sometimes held some sort of life or soul within them. However, there was no answer from the sword, forcing him shake his head clear before looking into the proud eyes of Nagato and odd ones of Konan, who had moved back to the side of her friend. So, what now? He asked, grateful for what Nagato was giving beyond words. Now, Nagato mused, we will place you unconscious and start the procedure. Don't worry about returning to Konoha too late. This will take at least 5 minutes with Konan's skills and then a couple minutes to bandage your eyes, and your healing abilities will kick in straight away. Hopefully, it will only take about 30 minutes. Naruto-kun. They all heard an unfamiliar voice, though to Naruto it was familiar, causing him to jump, having forgotten about his extra passenger. He looked on his shoulder to see Katsuyu slither up to it and look at him. What shall I tell your friends? she asked politely. "Oh, Katsuyu, I almost forgot you were here," Naruto exclaimed with wide eyes before taking a deep breath. Tell them I'll be back soon and to not worry." He almost grimaced at what he'd said. Telling people like Sakura-chan not to worry when he had gone off to God knows where was like asking them to panic. Katsuyu looked at him for a moment, scrutinizing him and hoping he was making the right decision by taking the power of the Rinnegan. Though even she knew how much it could help Naruto. "All right, I hope you know what you're doing. For Tsunade-sama's sake," the little slug told him, getting a small smile in return. "I do." He gave a nod to the slug queen. Naruto sighed and gave a nod to Nagato about what he'd said before Katsuyu reminded him she was still there, praying everything went fine. "All right, let's do this." He trailed off as he felt a prick in his neck, his vision went blurry, his speech went slurred and he couldn't find the strength to stand. The last thing he saw was heading to the ground before everything went black. Conan pulled the needle from his neck and quickly caught him before he struck the ground. "Got ya," she whispered, lowering the future Rinnegan wielder to the ground, the only hope the world will have for a savior. Nagato smiled sadly as he watched Conan place the young Uzumaki on his back and brush his hair back before untying his headband and placing it beside him. He knew it couldn't be easy on Conan, knowing he was about to die from using Chibaku Tensai in a weakened state and what he would be doing in a few moments. However, he couldn't, no, he wouldn't trust anyone else to perform such a delicate surgery on him to transplant his eyes into Naruto's sockets. "You will be a force to be reckoned with, Naruto Uzumaki. With the Rinnegan, your true power, the Namikaze Kekkai Genkei, that Zanpakuto and also, the power placed within you by Itachi Uchiha. You will give birth to a dojutsu unlike any other someday in the future and you will use it to bring peace to the land." Coughing up some blood, he looked up into Conan's concerned eyes. "Nagato, do you have to do this?" she asked, biting her lip to stop her emotions from jumping out. "After everything I've done, this is all I can do to repent for my mistakes." He looked down at his fellow clan member. "This is all I can do, to give Naruto-kun the power to protect his future, and the world's future. He will give birth to a new era, one of peace. The least I can do right now, is to give him the power and the hope he needs to make those dreams into reality." He placed his hands in a seal. "Help him back to Konoha when this is over. He will most likely go into a coma for a couple days to gather the information within the Rinnegan and use that time to look through everything." "What about Madara?" Conan asked, accepting her mission. Nagato's eyes narrowed at the name. "He will be looking for my corpse to take my eyes, no doubt." "Forget about him, protect Naruto. If Madara finds out what has happened here, I don't know what Madara will do to get these eyes. Though, I wouldn't be surprised if he had some way to receive a Rinnegan eye." "Understood," Conan asked shortly before closing her eyes as Nagato's chakras spiked. Well, what he had left. Gedo. Rinne Tensai no Jutsu. Outer Path. Samsara of Heavenly Life Technique. Konohagakure no Sato. Everyone was starting to collect all the corpses of people killed in the invasion and placing them all at the same part of the village when all of a sudden a massive poof of smoke rose up from the center of the village. When the smoke cleared, it displayed the outer path in all its glory. What's going on? Ino asked, slightly scared. Did Naruto lose? Shikamaru asked, worried himself. They hadn't heard of anything in a while now and the people were getting anxious of what may have happened. No, Shino's monotone voice broke through the whispers of the younger generation. Look. They all looked at the creatures as its mouth opened up to impossible lengths and thousands of green tendrils burst from its gaping maw. Each tendril struck a corpse, making everyone back away in alarm and caution, not knowing what to expect. He's bringing them back, Inoichi said, feeling a warmth spread throughout a body he was about to pick up. What? Shikaku asked, looking over at his lifelong friend. He's right, Sakura exclaimed in shock as she held Shizune's hand that was getting warmer. That thing, it's bringing them all back. But why would pain do that? Kiba asked, stroking Akamaru's back out of habit. Sakura smiled to herself, knowing just why someone who had just destroyed their home and killed many people would suddenly bring everyone back to life. Because he was changed by Naruto's power to bring out the good in someone and change their views. She told them, almost wanting to laugh out of sheer joy. It meant Naruto was alive. He had convinced pain to do good. She just didn't know what else Pain Nagato would soon do to give them hope that the future wasn't lost. A mile away from Konohagakure no Sato. Secluded cave. Minutes later, Nagato had just finished the jutsu and had been laid down beside Naruto by Konan, who had to wipe at the tears that fell from her eyes. Coating her hand in green chakra, she bent beside Naruto Uzumaki and placed her hand just above his left eye. "I hope you know what you're doing, Nagato," she told the body of her now deceased friend. Looking down at Naruto, she smiled slightly through the tears that wanted to fall. "You'll become a strong man, Naruto-san. I'll do as Nagato wished and help you where I can." With one last sigh, she got to work on transplanting the eyes. 25 minutes later, Naruto had woken up a few seconds ago and came under onslaught of information, images and stuff he couldn't understand flying around his mind. Pain unlike anything he had ever felt stabbed at him in his mind, eyes and even his body ached as if he'd been crushed under the Hokage mountain. Despite the intense pain, he could see jutsu flowing through his brain, how to use them, what they did, how much chakra they took, when to use them even. There were so many jutsu and yet he had no idea what they were, and yet he did as well. Was this what Nagato had meant? A part of him knows but the other is clueless? I swear to fucking Kami, if this pain doesn't lessen I'm gonna use these. Bring Nagato back and kick the living shit out of him. God, it feels like my eyes are on fire. I really am being given everything he knew, ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu and even kenjutsu, thousands of books worth. I even know how to do all that. Whoa, information on the Sharingan, Byakugan and even Kekai Genkai from other villages. Maybe when this incessant pain stops, I can sort throughout everything, especially once my body stops aching all fucking over. A sharp stab of pain spiked through his hand, forcing his hand to immediately grasp that part as his back arched from the ground. He absently noticed the feel of bandages wrapped around his eyes. So, what happened to Nagato? Before he could verbalize the question, the last moments of Nagato's life flashed through his mind in less than a second, as if telling him what he wanted to know. He brought everyone back. How? He sacrificed himself to repent and give me hope? I thought he was just dying. I never realized he was killing himself. The pain subsided for a moment. I promise Nagato, I'll train to become strong, stronger than ever before. I'll learn to use these eyes of yours as if they had always been a part of me, which technically they always have since I now know what you know. Anyway, I won't let your sacrifice be in vain. I see you're awake. An angelic voice that he had come to know came from beside him. He felt soft, delicate hands tighten the bandage before brushing his locks of hair back and over the bandages. You've been out of it for over 20 minutes. You probably already know, but Nagato revived everyone in the village. He heard a choked sob and guilt welled up inside of him. Nagato's dead and you now have the Rinnegan. For a short while you'll experience much pain, having so much knowledge inserted into your brain from the Rinnegan and having the same eyes merge with your chakra network, changing your DNA and physical body. It will eventually place you into a temporary coma. It may just be a day, in fact, depending on how fast those eyes work and how great your healing ability works as well. When you wake up again, you will have changed somewhat. You will be able to activate the Rinnegan or deactivate it at will. Unlike with Nagato, it won't be permanently active. I'll be helping you back to Konoha. As you are now, you won't be able to make it by yourself. I can't possibly imagine the pain you must be going through right now. Within a couple days that knowledge will be integrated with your mind, you will simply know everything. With that, you will become more powerful than you've ever been before. Naruto listened top everything with rapt attention, eyes closed so tightly that they burned stronger from the intense fire that seemed to coat them. Most likely the burning was from the chakra from the Rinnegan fusing with his chakra network, as well as his healing restoring and merging his normal eyes with the dojutsu. No wonder Nagato had said being unconscious would be much better. He reached up with his hand, his shaking, no, his trembling hand to grasp Kona's that had moved to his bandages again to fuss with them. I'm sorry, was all he could say. There was nothing else one could say in such a moment. There were no cards for sorry for taking your only friend's eyes and then him bringing all of my loved ones back at the cost of his life. Then, in a moment of weakness, he felt Konan's head drop to his chest as her entire body was racked with sobs. Tears soaked his chest, and it was now he realized he wasn't wearing his jacket anymore. Weakly he lifted other hand, unable to move anything else, and placed it on her head, on her blue hair that felt like silk, funnily enough. It was all the comfort he could offer as his own tears dripped from his burning eyes, tears for a new friend, the death of one of the last two remaining Uzumakis, and more importantly the loss of a brother in arms. I'm sorry. Konohagakure no Sato's forest. 5 minutes later, Naruto and Konan ambled through the forest, what was left of Konoha's forest, with some difficulty. Konan had one of her arms wrapped around his midsection and had placed his left arm over her shoulder and around her neck to keep him steady through the walk. Every now and again, he would grasp at his head, or flinch, grit his teeth and almost collapse under the onslaught of knowledge being shoved into his mind all at once. Konan had been able to see blots of red appearing on the bandages and could only guess it was tears of blood from the transplantation. After she had finished transplanting the eyes, she had stored Naruto's blue orbs and Nagato's body within a scroll, preserve the two since she wanted to bury Nagato properly and Naruto's eyes may be needed in the future. She winced for a moment as she heard a small whimper pass through Naruto's clenched teeth as he obviously tried to hold out against the pain. "How do you feel?" she asked quietly, not wanting to hurt his head, speaking louder. Naruto glanced at her with partially open eyes. He had been able to open his eyelids up slightly without receiving too much pain. What surprised him though was that he could see through the bandages, though everything was a mix of black and white, perhaps a bit of gray as well. In a way, being able to see through the bandages made him really realize he had been transplanted with the Rinnegan. Now if only the pain would stop. His bones felt like they were constantly breaking and rebuilding, most likely his body was changing as Nagato said it would. It felt like his cells were burning away before instantly replaced with new ones, over and over and over again. Seeing Konan in a blurred image of black and white, he smiled slightly with a grimace. Never, better. He winced at the sound of pain he made in between talking. We're almost there, Naruto-kun. Katsuyu's soft voice reached his ears as the slug on his right shoulder informed him. She had been slowly giving him chakra to heal him of his previous injuries, so what he was going through at the moment wouldn't get any worse. God forbid if they did. All right, he acknowledged with a slight nod that brought on another bout of pain. Over the journey back, he had been able to see and even feel as information was uploaded to his brain from his new eyes. Even as his chakra network changed due to the Rinnegan's influence. So many jutsu had filtered through his brain, jutsu he had never dreamed of before, and yet he knew how to use them, knew the hand seals and what they did. It was honestly amazing. Strapped to his waist was the Zanpakuto, the sentient katana that he had received from his fellow clan member before his death. After a couple minutes of walking and pausing a couple of times to get his bearings, they had finally arrived at the large gates that had managed to survive the attack. Walking further in, still held up by Konan, they stopped just inside the gate as they came upon a scene that Naruto would have embedded in him for his entire life. Every villager, shinobi and hell he could swear there were animals. All of them were stood in a large gathering apparently waiting for him. "You did it, Naruto," shouted a shinobi. "Welcome home, Naruto," exclaimed a civilian girl. "You're a hero," cheered another shinobi. "We believed in you," cheered a section of ninja. "Thank you, Naruto," cheered more civilians. Naruto's mouth opened wordlessly, unable to say anything to express what it all meant to him. Against his will, tears of blood slid down his face at finally being acknowledged. A part of his dream was complete. The people of his home no longer hated him. Well, there probably will some, but seeing everyone gathered just for him and cheering loudly, he felt like he was at the top of the world. Until a stab of pain shot through his body, almost making him collapse. "Naruto," he heard a familiar voice shout. Looking up, he was able to just catch a bob of short hair. Unfortunately, seen in black and white at the moment, he couldn't see the color, but he couldn't mistake that voice as he felt and saw a hand coated in chakra hovering over his eyes. "Sakura-chan?" he whispered weakly. "Yeah," he heard, though this time her voice contained joy and sadness at the same time. "I don't know what you did, but everyone's alive. Kakashi-sensei is in a medical tent we managed to set up quickly. He had tried to come after you and bring you back, but his body was too damaged to do anything. I was going to come for you when Katsuyu explained to me about everything that had happened and your eyes." He felt her hand against his cheek as she lifted his head to see her shed some tears, and he realized he'd never seen her really cry, not for him anyway. "Are you sure this is the right thing to do?" Sakura had been terrified for her teammate and also the young man she was beginning to admit her growing feelings for. After hearing from Katsuyu that he was going to confront the real pain, she'd almost been given a heart attack, and remembering the look on everyone else's face at the time, she doubted she was alone in that one. Then not long after, everyone had been revived with Katsuyu explaining that Naruto had convinced Pain to believe in him, still shocking to her even now, and then that Naruto had accepted the power offered to him and what would happen. She hadn't wanted to believe it at first, knowing and understand just how much pain he'd be going through assimilating so much knowledge all at once and having his body change. Even now she could see he had gotten slightly taller, his hair had gotten longer, and if she was correct, there was red highlights appearing. She could also clearly see the dabs of red spots on the bandages. The dry blood tears down his cheeks, and it almost made her want to cry that he would go through so much to protect everyone. Naruto grasped her hand in one of his trembling ones. Even now, when he was in love to Mari and in a real relationship, his feelings for Sakura hadn't lessened at all. Though, he had a good idea that in the near future, with being the last of two clans, he would be forced into something that the council finally cooked up. He would definitely have to talk to Tamari soon. I had no choice, Sakura-chan. With this I can protect everyone and bring peace to this world. He sighed, letting loose a shuddering breath. I won't have to run from Akatsuki anymore. With these eyes, I'm already beginning to see more clearly now. All my mistakes, every wrong decision, I can make up for them now. Naruto? Sakura whispered, temporarily ignoring the cheering from behind her and their friends coming up to them from seeing Naruto's state. Come on, Yubaka, I've set up a medical tent for you. She gave a nod to Konan, still unsure of how to act around her, especially since she still wore the Akatsuki cloak. Naruto gave a small nod, barely feeling the pain anymore or anything, in fact, as he slowly slipped away to unconsciousness. Whatever you say. He trailed off, and Sakura knew he must be in a lot of pain for him being okay with going to anything remotely like a hospital with no hassle. Though, seeing her teammate flinch and whimper, she couldn't imagine just how much pain he was in, considering he could usually be dealt a lot of pain and walk away with his goofy grin. Konohagakure no Sato. Naruto's medical tent. 2 days later. Kakashi Hitaki, Konohagakure Jonin, former student of the Yondaime Hokage, known worldwide for his use of the Sharingan, nicknamed Kopi Ninja no Kakashi, Kopi Ninja Kakashi, and Sharingan no Kakashi. Kakashi of the Sharingan was currently stood at the entrance of Naruto's medical tent on the inside, so he was able to see Naruto's current condition. As soon as he had awoken a day earlier, he had been debriefed by both Sakura and Konan, former Akatsuki member. He had obviously recognized her as soon as he saw her, but since he was the type to find answers before taking action, he listened to Sakura as she explained what had happened while he was unconscious. Pain bringing everyone back, which was a given since he was alive himself. Pain then giving Naruto the Rinnegan and everything the man knew. Obviously it was consensual, as Konan had told them the Rinnegan would only accept Naruto as its wielder that way. The fact that dojutsu was practically sentient in the manner that it stored information in a sort of database, and would merge its own chakra with Naruto and changing his physique to how it should be, was scarier than he'd like to admit. It went to show that the Rinnegan was no simple dojutsu. They had told him Naruto had been in terrible pain after the transplantation from having the Rinnegan already merging with his chakra pathways and implanting all knowledge within Naruto. Konan had told him that on the way to the village, the Rinnegan had been active since Naruto could see through the bandaging, but everything was black and white. That had reminded him of the Byakugan. However, when Naruto had blacked out after entering the village, they'd noticed that Naruto was healing faster than they, or even Pain, or was it Nagato now? Either way, they'd found he was healing faster than they'd predicted. The area around his eyes had healed, but nevertheless they kept the bandages wrapped around his eyes for precaution. Even to Konan the Rinnegan was a mystery. Only Pain had understood it, meaning when Naruto awoke, he would too understand it. Then it came down to the business with the village itself. Letting out a weary sigh, he moved closer to Naruto's bed, where the blonde-haired young man lay, though he could see red highlights coming through. Leaning against a pole that held the tent up, he thought about what Shizune had soon explained to him. Tsunade-sama was in a coma from having used her Sozo Saisei, creation rebirth, to send her chakra into Katsuyu, allowing the Slug Queen to heal and keep the majority of the villager and shinobi alive. Then the Fire Daimyo had called for a meeting of the next Hokage, since he couldn't place his trust in the belief that Tsunade may wake up. The only good thing however was that he had said he wouldn't begin the meeting until Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze had awoken. Clearly the man had been informed of just what Naruto had accomplished and that the young man would be awake any day. Never mind the fact the man had said his last name, his real last name. Some part of Kakashi prayed that the fire daimyo wanted to wait for Naruto to wake to make him Hokage, since this was now the perfect chance for Danzo to finally make his move, and honestly, only Naruto would be able to take the position of Hokage. The village itself though was slowly picking up. The rebuilding was slow but making process, and after all it wasn't like they'd had to build it from scratch before. Konan herself had been standing guard over Naruto the entire time, and Kakashi had to respect the loyalty she displayed to Naruto. Despite being enemies just 2 days earlier, Naruto, who was now the legacy of Minato Namikaze, his mother, Jiraiya, and now Nagato. Each one had left some part of them with Naruto, each in their own way for the young man to fulfill his dream and their own. Now though, as he looked down at Naruto, his student, pride unlike he'd ever felt before filled him. This young man of 16 had defeated a man that had killed him, Jiraiya-sama, and even Hanzo of the Salamander. He almost laughed at how insane it sounded. Nevertheless, this boy was still becoming stronger as he thought about him becoming stronger. The Rinnegan had finished changing his body so Naruto could use the jutsu he probably knew more efficiently like Nagato had. He could only imagine the library of jutsu his mind was at the moment. He would be able to use every element, and knowing Naruto, he would be able to use the sub-elements also, especially with just how the Uzumaki clan were distant relatives of the Senju. They may be distant, but they were relatives nonetheless. Naruto probably also knew the Namikaze clan's Kekkai Genkei, something Kakashi had always wanted to explain to Naruto, but seeing how the blonde hadn't grown as he should have, or even shown signs of activating it, he had pinned the blame on Kyuubi and the seal from stunting Naruto's growth like it had. And now finally, maybe he would see Naruto's true strength. Of course he knew the blonde was stronger than he'd shown. It wasn't just the fact that Jiraiya-sama had told him before he'd left for a megacure, but it was the way Naruto held himself. He was confident in himself, in his power, and he always seemed to hold himself back in fights. He had wanted to tell Naruto he knew he was stronger than he'd shown, that Jiraiya-sama had also told him of his little escapades with a certain Kage's sister. Yes, Jiraiya-sama knew, he wasn't known as the best information gatherer for nothing. But for Naruto's sake the man had kept quiet. He may have been a pervert, but even he wouldn't tease Naruto or make fun of him about falling in love with Temari. From what Kakashi had been told by the former Sannin, Naruto had become a man a long time ago. After that information had been shared, they both had to smile with pride that Naruto had bagged one of the hottest kunoichi out there. Kakashi understood Naruto's reasons for keeping everything a secret, but he would have liked to talk about the boy he'd come to see as a son or maybe a nephew, about his personal life. Sighing, he decided not to lament on what could have been but rather what could be. He just hoped that despite Naruto becoming even more powerful, he would still hold an important place in his life. You have no idea how much you affect people. Sakura's changed from being a less talented kunoichi to one that kid and most likely will become one of the strongest shinobi. Sai, I may not have been in the same team as him as long as you, but for you to have changed someone like Sai to become loyal to you, even more so than Danzo, is incredible. Even Hinata now has almost stopped her stuttering. I don't know what happened when she stepped in between you and Pain, but Sakura told me that Hinata seemed more confident in herself now. You even changed Neji years back. Kiba's no longer as arrogant as he sued to be, though being from his clan, he's bound to show he's an alpha to get respect. Hey, even Ino is becoming stronger after seeing you use your Rasen Shuriken. From what Inoichi told me, she had practically ordered him to teach her more of their family techniques. She learned medical ninjutsu from Sakura and Shizune while you were away leaning and mastering Senjutsu chakra. She may one day become one of the brightest kunoichi alongside Sakura. Lee, well, he has decided you're his rival. I'd laugh at that, but honestly, having Guy claim I'm his rival for as long as I can remember, I know the hardships that will befall you. Shikamaru actually works harder now. Choji is no longer the coward he once was. Tenten had always been a dedicated kunoichi, though I think when she sees your new sword, you'll have a new fan. Kakashi thought to himself, thinking of how the younger generation had changed. He was broken from any potential thoughts by the groan coming from the bed. Looking down sharply, he watched as Naruto, who was obviously now awake, slowly lifted a hand up to his bandage and felt it as if checking it was still there. The young blonde slowly pulled himself up into a seating position and stared down at his hands through the bandages. "How long have I been out of it, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto asked, not even looking at him, which caused Kakashi to actually blink at him. "You can see me?" Kakashi asked. "No." Naruto shook his head, clenching his fists as if testing they worked. "I can sense your chakra beside me." He slipped a leg over the side of the bed and then another as he placed his hand on the edge and pushed himself up and stumbled slightly. "Whoa, I feel different," he muttered as he pushed himself completely up, only wearing sweatpants. Kakashi actually stared in shock as he saw Naruto's new muscles actually ripple and flex along his skin. "Holy crap, he's like Guy." Shaking his head, he answered his student. "You've been out for 2 days, a shorter time than what Conan had thought you'd be out of it." "Conan?" Naruto questioned, glancing back. "She's still here then?" "Yes, seems like you've gained another follower." Kakashi smirked slightly. Naruto smiled and gave a short nod before heading to a mirror that had been placed in his tent. "Good, I don't want her out of my sight," he said, surprising Kakashi. "You don't trust her?" "I trust her, with my life even," Naruto assured his sensei. "But, it worked. I know everything Nagato knew, jutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, hell, even the knowledge of all of the countries and lands. Basically, everything Nagato had seen, done or read, all up here." He tapped his head. "Anyway, I'm worried about Conan. With what I know now, there are people, or rather a person, who will want to kill her for betraying him." He stood in front of the mirror. "Who?" Kakashi asked, realizing Naruto was basically a goldmine of Akatsuki information. "The true leader of Akatsuki." Naruto answered with a weary sigh, sounding too old for his age. "I want to tell you, Kakashi-sensei, but right now I can't. The village needs rebuilding. I need to work out the kinks of my new abilities." He reached up and grasped the edge of his bandages and began to unravel it. "There's more happened in the village you don't know about, Naruto." Kakashi sighed heavily. "Things are worse now, and frankly we need you." Naruto pulled off the rest of his bandages, revealing his usual bright blue eyes. His healing had restored them and he could feel the Rinnegan within them. With just a pulse of chakra and he could activate them, but it was too early to attempt that, especially in the village. He looked in the mirror and took note of his changes. He now stood at the full height of 6 feet 1 inch with blonde hair that held red highlights reaching just past his shoulders while parts of his fringe shadowed his eyes. His whisker marks had vanished from his cheeks due to the changes of his body, but left minor traces of them behind. His body was more muscular, most likely to fit the needs of what he could now and what he would be able to do. His face was more rugged, gone was any baby fat, and in place was a younger version of his father, except a bit more muscular. He had to say though, he liked the red in his hair, but where did he get it from? Shrugging, he turned to Kakashi, his bandages hung around his fingers. "What's happened?" he asked, dreading the answers from the sigh that Kakashi let out. "It's Tsunade-sama." Naruto's stomach dropped immediately. Nothing could happen to his Ba-chan, it just couldn't. She was all he had left when it came to people he looked to for advice, apart from Kakashi and Yamato, that is. But Tsunade, she was the only reason he hadn't upped and left the village from the treatment he had received before he started getting praised. She was the one that he would go to for some advice about life. Nobody knew, but he had confided in her about his relationship with Temari. He'd been afraid of a long-distance relationship and he knew she knew he could do more since Jiraiya had to tell her. Not that he was angry at the man, in fact it made it easier for him. She'd been the one to suggest communicating with summons, she'd been the one to make sure no one disturbed Temari or him when she'd been in the village after he'd returned. Losing her now, it would shatter him. She's fallen into a coma. She used her unique jutsu to give all of her chakra to Katsuyu. She saved the majority of the village, and I know it may not mean anything, but she did the Hokage's job. Kakashi looked at Naruto to see him angrily push against the temple, willing tears away. But when I left, she was fine." Naruto shook his head and gazed at Kakashi, his blue eyes flashing a light purple, his Rinnegan for a second before going back to blue. "It was barely noticeable. I won't begin to understand your connection with Tsunade-sama, Naruto. But when you left to fight Pain." "Nagato," Naruto corrected. "Call him Nagato, Pain was a mask." Kakashi gave a nod in acceptance. Nagato, Tsunade was forced to drop her genjutsu and reverting to her true form. Currently, she has barely any chakra within her. You should be proud of her, Naruto. Years ago she would have never dreamed of saving Konoha until she met you. While you may not like what had happened, she did her duty. She protected lives ahead of her own. She did what she could to protect her home. Kakashi explained with sorrow at what had happened to their Hokage. Naruto grit his teeth. He didn't like what had happened, but she was Hokage, it was her duty after all. Kakashi was right though, she never would have saved the village and its people before he'd met her, and what would have happened if he hadn't brought her back? Would everyone still be dead? Who on earth would be Hokage? Danzo? The very thought made him shudder in disgust. I understand, I'll visit her when I can. What else is there? He asked. Without a Hokage in the village, someone would no doubt be selected. Well, that was the first topic. Second, the Raikage has called for a summit, and I will be frank as to the importance of this summit at another time. However, you should know that this summit will be a convening of the 5 cages, from Iwa, Kumo, Kiri, Suna, and of course, Konoha. Kakashi explained. They had received the letter earlier that day actually, and it had mentioned about a team of 3 shinobi being sent their way with vital information. I see. Naruto nodded. But we have no Hokage, right? Right. This brings us to the last topic. Since there is no Hokage, the daimyo has ordered for a meeting to take place to decide who will be Tsunade-sama's successor. He held up a hand to stop Naruto from speaking. I know what you're thinking, but at times like these, even I agree we can't wait for her to wake up. Right now, we're vulnerable, more vulnerable we've ever been. The daimyo has requested that the meeting be held off until you wake up. The meeting will be between you, the daimyo, and the council of Konoha. Me? Naruto questioned confused. Yes. It would appear that the daimyo somehow has knowledge of your heritage and of your defeat of Nagato. Honestly, I don't know what he wants you there for. Whether it's because right now the village sees you as its hero or the fact you're probably stronger than anyone in the village now. Especially with the gift from Nagato, I couldn't say. Naruto gave a nod to what his sensei had said. He wouldn't brag and say he was the strongest, but he knew once he got the hang of the Rinnegan and the repertoire of jutsu and everything he has now, he would be pretty damn formidable. Especially since he doesn't have the drawbacks that Nagato had from sharing his abilities amongst bodies. Instead he held each and every power. When will the meeting be? He queried. He wanted to see Ba-chan as soon as possible. I'll have to go see the daimyo and let him know you're awake. He was the one who requested me to check up on you and report back to him. In the meantime you should go stretch your legs and see Tsunade-sama. She's currently in her personal tent just down the way. I think Sakura, Ino and Shizune were looking over. Kakashi told him as he lifted the curtain at the door to step through. And Naruto, I'm sure Jiraiya would proud of you. Naruto gave him a smile and nod as Kakashi left. Naruto looked back to the mirror, admiring his new looks and inwardly hoping Temari didn't mind the change. Though he knew she wasn't the shallow type of woman, girl to simply fall out of love because he looked slightly different. Well, older he'd say, and without being arrogant he would have to say he even looked more handsome. So, Ba-chan is in a coma. The Raikage has requested a summit of the 5 cage. I wonder what's up with that for him to take such an action all of a sudden. And now the daimyo is here to select a new Hokage. No matter what, I can't let Danzo take the position. With the knowledge I now possess, I can show Danzo for what he really is. He thought to himself, assessing everything that he'd been informed of. He looked over to his bed and saw his new katana, or rather his zanpakuto, stood up against it. Walking over to it, he grasped the handle of it and sighed. This sword was the only connection he now had to his mother's home village. Well, he guessed it was his mother's village since his father had been born in Konoha, concluding his mother's name was Uzumaki, something that gave him some peace of mind. What did you call yourself again? Ah, Hirenmaru, is that it? He tried to communicate to the sword since it had spoken through his mind once before. Nothing came through though, making him sigh. Maybe he wasn't ready to use it to its full power yet. He knew sentient weapons were always more than just a metal blade. Usually they had abilities and even a mind of their own. Take Samahata for instance, a sword that absorbed chakra and only allowed Kisame Hoshigaki to use it. Zabuza Momochi's Zanbatu, Kabikirabocho, decapitating carving knife, would repair itself by absorbing the blood of its enemies. Who knows how many more weapons were out there like that. But despite being cut off from his own sword, he could tell it held great power, especially if it was as old as Nagato had said. Looking back at the mirror across from him, he tried to access the Rinnegan but got nothing more than a mere flicker of his eyes changing color for a brief second, a very brief second. I guess it's like the Sharingan in the way it will only activate in a certain situation. Despite it being from some who had activated it permanently, it must be because it's new to me, and since it's sentient as well, it must be waiting for the right moment before it grants me the ability to use it. He concluded to himself. Shrugging, he decided that at the moment he didn't need to worry about it. He could still use all the other jutsu he now knew for the many elements, and even though he could use the dojutsu, he knew he could use all the elements now and even sub-elements. It was kind of strange to him when he thought about it. Knowing new jutsu and even knowing he already knew how to use it was a little confusing, but he had no doubt over time he would get used to it. It was Nagato's memories though that was weird. While he had first though Nagato's and his own memories would merge, it wasn't that case. Unlike his jutsu and other abilities he could now do, which were in fact merged with the knowledge of what he could already do, giving the impression he had always used them, etc. The memories were completely different. He could almost picture two doors within his mind, the primary one that held his own memories, always accessible to him, and a secondary door behind that one. The one he could open up and pick all kinds of things from the door, including the knowledge of the Namikaze Kekkai Genkai. He closed his eyes as he felt a rush of information download into his mind. Jinten, swift release. Naruto gave name to the Kekkai Genkai passed down amongst the Namikaze. The same one that allowed his father to come up with the idea, create and master the Hiraishin. When he had spoken with his father, which still felt strange to call the Yondaime such a thing, the man had told him that the Hiraishin was a technique only his blood could learn, and one day he hoped Naruto would learn it eventually. He hadn't understood at first, but now, he understood. It was only a technique a Namikaze could learn. Jinten ninjutsu were techniques that could be used to move at virtually instantaneous speed, granting the user an advantage over opponents with greater strength. It was like an upgraded version of the Shunshin no Jutsu, body flicker technique. And then the Hiraishin came afterwards. The Hiraishin, though he could now understood how it worked. By using the Kekkai Genkai Jinten and Kachiyose no Jutsu, summoning technique, which revolved around manipulation of time and space rather than accelerated movement, it allowed his father and hopefully someday himself to, instead of bring something to them, it allowed them to be sent somewhere else. Many would say that it was basically just the opposite of Kachiyose no Jutsu to sending themselves somewhere, but upon arriving at that spot, the user would need some technique of Kekkai Genkai that involved some sort of speed to land safely without any damage and to actually survive the journey and not be torn apart from the inside mid-sending. He still had a long way to go before he become the shinobi he would one day be. He had much jutsu to learn, or rather get himself comfortable with, since he had technically learnt them. He had to access his Namikaze Kekkai Genkai and now his transplanted Kekkai Genkai. Never mind, he had to communicate with his sword somehow. Sighing once more, he looked over to the corner of the tent where there were clothes folded up and decided to get changed and get out of the tent. He had spent the past 2 days unconscious. He needed to see the state of Ba-chan before he could truly believe it. And it was finally time he stopped playing the dumb card. It was time he revealed who he really was from now on. Ino Yamanaka was a member of the famed Yamanaka clan, which was made famous during the Third Great Shinobi War due to Ino's father Inoichi, who had been a member of the Ino Shika-cho trio. A team that had used extraordinary teamwork to defeat enemies and opponents far tougher than they were, making them one of the more feared people during the war. The Yamanaka clan was also well known for their jutsu that allowed them to invade the minds of their opponents, making them wonderful interrogation experts and also allowing them to turn their opponents against their teammates. At one time Ino was just like any other young girl, fawning over Sasuke Uchiha, otherwise known as the last Uchiha. His dark, handsome and mysterious personality always seemed to attract the young girls. However, reality had struck her like she'd been slapped by the Hokage mountain itself when she'd seen Naruto Uzumaki carried through the village gates and to the hospital with a hole in his chest courtesy of Sasuke's Chidori. She hadn't wanted to believe at first. Heck, who would want to hear your crush had tried to kill his teammate all for the sake of power? And that teammate had been the one that she'd started to see as more than just the dead last he used to be. It was that moment of her life that she'd realized she had wasted most of her academy life drooling over someone who cared for nothing but revenge. That had been the last she'd heard of Naruto until Sakura had told her that Naruto was in fact leaving the village to go train Jiraiya of the legendary freakin' Sannin. That had been a shock to her system. The fact someone so strong would be personally training someone she'd looked down upon her own life. It was also just one more reason as to why she had to get stronger. So for those 3 years Naruto had been away, she trained her damn ass off. Ino had trained in medical ninjutsu alongside Sakura under Tsunade-sama's supervision. She had proven to be skilled enough to be able to tell the severity of an attack with just a glance. With the knowledge of plants and flowers she gained in her family's flower shop, she also had the capability to create herbal medicines more efficiently. Like Sakura, she also gained better chakra control because of her study in medical techniques, allowing her to fight better in taijutsu. At some point she had started to use a tanto, sometimes for fights or simply when it came to making herbal medicines, as the tanto was perfect for cutting up plants and flowers without causing any damage to them. After Naruto had come back she had heard bits and pieces from Sakura, who she had re-befriended after a while, and learned he had become much stronger. She hadn't seen him properly however until she had gone with Sakura one day to where he had been training. Apparently Sakura had been taking some medicals ball to him to help him work harder and replenish his chakra and stamina quickly. When she'd seen dozens of clones lined up along a plank of wood and briefly cutting a waterfall in half before it crashed down again, she'd been gobsmacked, to be honest. When she'd seen the proud look Sakura's face at the time, Ino realized that despite problems in the past, Naruto and Sakura had become closer than she'd ever guessed. Sakura had explained how Naruto was working on mastering his futon chakra to complete the Rasengan since it was an incomplete jutsu and had simply been floored. She'd seen the aftermath of whatever had been struck by that ball of chakra, and to be blunt, whatever was struck did not survive. The fact Naruto was making it stronger only seemed to make her realize how much stronger Naruto was becoming. She'd planned on getting training from her father on their clan techniques, but then the mission to search for the Akatsuki had come up. The same people after Naruto. If she'd known how that mission would have turned out, she would have trained until every part of her body bled from exhaustion. Losing Asuma-sensei had simply been like ripping apart her soul. The man had trained them and sort of raised them since they were just 12 years old, and in one simple mission, he was gone. Forever. With Shikamaru, Choji and somehow Kakashi, they'd gone after the two Akatsuki for simple revenge. They wanted blood, and while they wanted nothing more than the two of them dead, she realized midway through the battle that they were going to die if Kakashi-sensei didn't do something soon. Because fighting Kakuzu was like fighting multiple people with high-level jutsu. Then the impossible happened. Naruto and his team had shown up. But Naruto, well, he had changed into someone else. No longer was he the goofball that actually managed to brighten people's lives up. No longer was he the little runt that ran about laughing. He was a true shinobi, ready to kill in a moment's notice. She'd known he was also close to Asuma-sensei. In what ways she didn't know how he was close to the man. So obviously he'd taken Asuma's death hard. Hearing him speak of taking on Kakuzu had nearly driven her into a panic at the time. She may not have been close to the blonde, but he was a comrade and, well, at the very least he was her friend. When she'd first felt the chakra and the raw power from his futon Rasen Shuriken, she'd almost pissed herself. No joke. When she'd seen him form the jutsu, she had realized she was behind people like Naruto in certain aspects. At that time the most she'd done was use Shintenshin no Jutsu on a bird and distract Kakuzu from killing Choji with kunai. That was it. It was also the first time she had ever seen such a serious side of Naruto in battle, and it had opened her eyes to the kind of man Naruto actually was. But when she'd seen the full effects of the jutsu when he practically demolished Kakuzu, she had been glad Naruto hadn't been too responsive when she'd healed, because between admiring his muscles as he was pressed against her at the time, had made her almost strip him down and ravish him. Because under those baggy clothes was a body worthy of a god. Why he hid it, she didn't understand. After that mission, it seemed that Kami hated Naruto and was giving him the short end of the stick. First he had to chase after Sasuke Uchiha, who eventually killed his brother Itachi. Then as soon as Naruto arrived back he found out that his sensei and the man who'd raised him for 3 years had been killed by the group after him. She could only imagine the anguish he would have been in. Then he'd left to become even more powerful to carry on Jiraiya-sama's legacy. It had been only about a month or two before Konoha was finally attacked by Akatsuki and in the end, turned into nothing more than a large crater. Then a miracle had happened. Naruto Uzumaki, the new sage, had appeared in the village, only to see the home he'd loved wiped off the map. She hadn't seen much of the fighting, but she'd seen enough explosions to know there was some high-level fighting going on. In the end, Naruto had won and come back to the village with bandages wrapped around his eyes, the blue-haired Akatsuki woman holding him up, and he looked as if he would die any minute. Somehow though, Sakura had known exactly what was going on and had immediately taken Naruto to a tent where he had then been stuck for 2 days, in a coma. However, as she looked down at Tsunade-sama, who was also in a coma and looking her real age for the first time in years, she couldn't help but wonder just how many more tragedies and crises must they go through before finally finding peace. She tilted her head as she looked at Tsunade and wondered why she used a powerful genjutsu to hide her appearance when admittedly she didn't look too bad. Yes, her blonde hair had some silver hairs and she had some wrinkles on her forehead and a couple on her hands. Her skin wasn't exactly as perfect as it once was, but it was nothing to be ashamed of. Hell, Ino prayed she looked that good after she turned 50. Beside her, Sakura and Shizune had done all they could to hopefully heal Tsunade-sama or inject chakra into her to bring her out of the coma. Instead, it was all for naught. She didn't even so much as twitch. From what she and everyone had heard, the daimyo had come to Konoha to select a new Hokage since he couldn't put his faith in Tsunade waking up, especially with the news about what the Raikage had proposed. At the moment, however, the daimyo had done nothing. Why that was nobody knew except certain individuals. Is there really nothing we can do? Ino asked the pair. They all felt useless, not being able to help whatsoever. Shizune said as she knelt by her master. No, she used everything she had to give to Katsuyu to save the villagers. Usually she'd heal quicker if chakra was injected into her, but the strain was simply too much on her body. She informed the two of what they basically already knew. Sakura closed her eyes as she knelt beside her sensei and Hokage and grasped one of her hands. She almost shivered as she felt cold, almost dead feel to it. How could everything we've ever loved just be gone in an instant? She asked, though she didn't expect any answer since it was more of a rhetorical question. So it's true. The three all turned their heads to see the flap of the tent open and close as a different Naruto Uzumaki stepped through. He was wearing black hakama, waraji, white tabi and a black open shirt with a sword attached to his waist. His necklace from Tsunade was hung around his neck as well, since it had seemed to have repaired itself after being crushed, most likely from the chakra it held. Of course, it was more how much he had gotten taller and the resemblance to the Yondaime Hokage that shocked them. The fact his hair had grown and gained red highlights caught them off guard as well. "En Naruto-kun?" Shizune questioned with wide eyes just to make sure it really was him, especially since Heist's voice had also gotten deeper and more masculine. "Shizune-chan," Naruto greeted with a smile, stepping more into the tent. "I'll explain my changes later on, when all of this mess is sorted out." Sakura looked at her teammate in shock at how much he'd changed. Sure, Conan had explained his body would be altered, but not to this extent. She was also happy his blue eyes were back, since the simple brightness of them seemed to calm anyone down and relax them. "So, it all worked?" she asked, confusing the other two medics in the room. "And you're all right?" "Yeah, and I'm fine, just a few little kinks here and there." Naruto nodded before noticing Ino also in the room. "Ino-chan, good to see you weren't one of the more injured," he said with a smile while she just looked at him with wide eyes. "And, was that drool?" He shook his head, slightly used to girls acting that way from his travels. Apparently his blonde hair made him look exotic, never mind the whisker-like marks. Though he had to admit, he never would have expected it from Ino of all people. "Naruto?" Ino muttered before shaking her head. "How are you awake so quickly?" "I have a fast healing ability." Naruto shrugged. Apparently it's something that the Uzumaki clan have, some sort of accelerated healing. Plus with the Kyuubi, well, even cuts heal up within minutes, sometimes even seconds. "Wait," Sakura started as she stood up. "Uzumaki clan?" Naruto winced. He hadn't meant to say that since it would involve explaining about Nagato being of his clan, and now he was the last. "I'll explain later, like with everything else." It's still a sore subject and really, I don't even know enough about my clan to even explain it someone else yet. He explained, though he knew he could easily tap into the knowledge base he now had for any information on the clan. Sakura eyed him for a moment before sighing and giving a nod. Fine, but later, we're talking about everything. She gave him a pointed look which he smiled slightly at. Sure. He then looked down at Tsunade and sighed before walking over to her. Kakashi-sensei told me everything that's been happening while I've been out of it. Is there nothing we can do? He asked the three ladies who sigh in unison as if rehearsed. As I was telling Sakura and Ino before you came in, Tsunade-sama used all of her chakra to give to Katsuyu to save the villagers, leaving with nothing and ending up in a coma from the strain. Don't forget, she wasn't as young as she looked. This is her real age, and sometimes I think even she forgets it sometimes. Shizune explained everything to Naruto, who chuckled slightly. I call her Ba-chan. Do you really think I'd forget about her age? He raised an eyebrow before sighing and kneeling down to the last parent figure he had left. I call her Ba-chan for a couple reasons, to be honest. One of them is because, well, she's the closest thing to a mother or grandmother I've ever had, and secondly, because of stuff like this. I didn't want her to overestimate herself and, well, there's not really a better way to say this, but I didn't want her to delude herself into thinking she really was in her 20s. The three young women smiled sadly at hearing that. Sometimes even they forget that Naruto's an orphan and the only familial figures he'd ever had were the Sanninme, Iruka, Kakashi, Jiraiya and Tsunade. So you don't do it to annoy her? Ino asked with raised brows. Naruto chuckled as he looked up at them. I wouldn't say that. Although, it's not fun when she actually manages to hit me with her damn paperweights. He smiled as he looked back down to the slightly wrinkled face of Tsunade. It's strange, seeing her so vulnerable. He murmured before sighing and standing up. Where's Kakashi-san? Shizune asked Naruto. He's gone to inform the daimyo that I'm awake. Seeing their confused looks, he elaborated. The daimyo didn't want to start the meeting for the new Hokage until I was awake. I don't know why, but I get the feeling it's about my heritage. Shizune's eyes widened hearing that. So, you know then? She asked almost hesitantly. Naruto smiled at her, letting her know that even though the older women knew, he wasn't mad. I know that you, Ba-chan, Ero Sennin and Kakashi knew. Maybe a couple other people knew, but I'm not mad. I probably should be because I've always wanted to know about my parents, but I guess in some way, I'm glad no one told me. Back then, when I was just a kid, I was immature, I couldn't keep my mouth shut, got myself into trouble, and while I think I may have kept it to myself, all I would have needed was for someone to goad me into something, and the next thing I'll know is that he was at the front gates. He admitted to Shizune with a shrug. While it was true that he understood, he was a little bit angry at Sarutobi for lying to him, saying he didn't know. It wouldn't have been too bad if the old man had simply said he didn't know but made some reasonable excuse why he couldn't tell him. Back then all he would have needed was some comment from Sasuke and he would have blurted it out. Shizune sighed in relief. She hadn't completely agreed with Tsunade-sama keeping information like that from Naruto, knowing how much the young man wanted some connection. Do you know about your mother? She asked. Naruto went wide-eyed hearing the question and gripped his sword. Why, you know who my mother is? He asked with a gulp. Meanwhile, Sakura and Ino had been looking at them in partial confusion and understanding. Sakura? Ino asked, getting the pink-haired girl's attention. Is Naruto's father, the Yondaime? She asked, glancing from Naruto to the Hokage mountain though the window in the tent. Huh? Sakura asked, with wide eyes as she too began to look between the two. I had no idea. She muttered before shaking her head and looking back at two, with Ino doing the same. You know who my mother is? Naruto asked with a vulnerable look. Shizune smiled gently. I didn't know her. Personally, I just know her name. I was just a kid back then, well, too young to be bothering myself with the older people at the time anyway. She saw Naruto give her a nod before continuing. All I'll be able to give you is her name. If you want to know more about her, or rather find about who she is, Kakashi-san would be the best person to speak to. She advised. Naruto gave a nod in understanding. He wanted to know her name at least, but then he'd have to wait to find stuff out about her, and even he couldn't that patient. So maybe it was best to find out everything at once. Now that he knew his father hadn't left him to the wolves and abandoned him because he thought he was a freak or a demon, it also meant that his mother was mostly likely dead from the way people spoke. Some way it was a relief to know she hadn't abandoned him either, though her being dead didn't exactly make the situation any better, but he'd waited 16 years. A couple more hours wouldn't hurt, to be honest. I'll speak to Kaka-sensei about her. He gave a nod to the older woman in thanks before turning to Sakura. Sakura-chan, do you know where Sai is? Sakura looked taken aback by the question but nodded nonetheless. I think he was with that Konan earlier. I don't think he exactly trusts her even though she did help you. I don't blame him though. Sakura explained, still a bit weary of the former Akatsuki women. Never mind the mild envy at how beautiful Konan looked despite her being in her 30s. She had also been a little uncomfortable at how protective Konan had been when Naruto had been in the coma, always staying outside of his tent and using her strange paper jutsu to surround the tent in case there were any threats wanting to attack Naruto. Sakura couldn't blame her though for that, since even she didn't know if someone would take advantage of Naruto being weak and attack him. Especially someone like Danzo. Naruto gave a nod in understanding. He couldn't blame her or anyone else for being weary of the blue-haired woman considering what had happened in the past few days. Thanks, and let me know when Ba-chan wakes up. I have some things to do, he told the young women. Alright, Shizune gave a nod. Just don't get yourself into any trouble. Naruto grinned as he walked over to the flap of the tent. Hey, what makes you think I'd manage that? He grinned wider at all three of their eye rolls before chuckling and walking out of the tent. As soon as he stepped out of it though, his face turned into a frown as he eyed the village. Well, more like he eyed the giant crater filled with tents and people, villagers and shinobi alike. I guess I should go find Konan and Sai then, he muttered before closing his eyes and gathering natural energy from the area around it and bending it with his own chakra, creating senjutsu chakra around his body. Senin Modo, Sage Mode, he uttered as he opened his eyes, revealing toad-like eyes, yellow irises, horizontal bar-like pupils, and the reddish-orange pigment mark of a true sage on each eye. Focusing on Sai's and Konan's chakra signature by using this mode's sensor abilities, he quickly found them near the tent he had been staying in. He had expected Konan there since she had been when he left tent, though he'd told her to stay watch over it since he didn't want people to know he was awake yet to not cause a fuss. Sighing, he deactivated his sage mode and placed his foot in front of him before vanishing in his shunpo. Naruto's medical tent. Outside. As Naruto arrived outside of his tent without making a sound, he came upon a strange scene of Konan and Sai simply staring each other in the eye with emotionless faces. The very faces they'd kept on for so long in their lives that it was almost instinctual for them. Shaking his head, he walked over to them. What's going on? Both Shinobi and Kunoichi looked over at him. Konan sighed while Sai looked surprised. Naruto-kun, you're awake? Sai asked with slightly wider eyes and a head tilted in question. Sai. Naruto nodded in greeting. Yeah, about 20 minutes or so ago actually. I've been looking for you. He turned to look at Konan. Have there been any problems? He asked. Konan though shook her head. No, other than this person trying to see you. But I told him that no one was allowed to see you just yet. She informed him. She began to smile at him. Has everything been fine after the change? She asked with concern. After all, he was carrying Yahiko's and Nagato's legacy now. Though she was worried about the blonde regardless. Maybe it was the fact that he reminded her of Yahiko by his personality and looks, or maybe it was just the fact that he was the embodiment of Yahiko's and Nagato's will and that she would do anything to see their will realized. Meaning she would protect Naruto till her death. Naruto smiled back at his new comrade. Yeah, I still need to sort some of the stuff I got up here though. He tapped his head with his finger. Receiving a nod in understanding, he turned to Sai, who still looked confused about what had changed in the blonde. Sai, I need to ask some stuff about Danzo. He was easily able to notice Konan stiffen at the name, and he was sure Sai noticed also, though his emotionless look covered it. I can't talk about him. Sai answered simply. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that, able to tell he wasn't denying him but rather stating a matter. Why not? He asked while Konan turned to face the incredibly pale young man. A seal. Sai answered, sticking his tongue out to show a black tattoo covering the center. Danzo placed it on me when I was first recruited. If I try to talk about him, then it will activate and paralyze my body, preventing me from moving or even talking. I see. Naruto frowned. Can you answer this though? Would Danzo do anything right now to achieve being Hokage? Even having Tsunade assassinated? Naruto asked with such seriousness that Sai could have sworn he saw the Yondaime behind him. At the moment though, Naruto acted, looked and even spoke like a Hokage. Sai looked away for a moment. All he had to do was nod or shake his head and he would have finally betrayed Danzo and joined Naruto's side, for good. Sighing, he looked back at Naruto who'd kept his face neutral the entire time, something that even surprised him. Looking his teammate in the eyes he gave a curt nod, knowing it wouldn't activate the seal. Shit, Naruto muttered, rubbing his temples. Konan, there's going to be a meeting with the daimyo, the council and Danzo. He said looking at the women in question. He grinned, revealing a set of fangs. How would you finally like to show everyone the man Danzo really is? For the first time in many years, Konan let a wide grin spread across her face while Sai simply raised an eyebrow. Naruto. Naruto turned to his left to see Kakashi drop down before him. The daimyo is about to start the meeting, he wants you there as soon as possible. It seems the elders are getting restless. Also Fukasaku-sama is waiting as well. He has information he needs to share with you. Understood. The sage gave a nod, having a good idea on what the old toad wanted. Come on Konan, oh and Sai. He turned back to his teammate and gave a nod. Thank you, for being a true member of this team. He grinned as Sai's eyes went wide. A second later and Naruto, Konan and Kakashi had vanished leaving Sai alone. He's changed. The black-haired rude shinobi muttered before shrugging and walking away. Daimyo's makeshift headquarters. Council chamber. We plan to continuing working with other countries against the threat posed by Akatsuki. Homura stated clearly to the council and the fire daimyo. After what has happened to Konoha, Hi-no Kuni will put every effort into helping rebuild the village from this latest attack. We'll first have to come up with a budget, and considering the strain on the other countries, I suppose we should be thankful that the people of this village are still standing. One of the counselors said with a nod. There is something else we should consider first. Who will be the next Hokage? Danzo asked the question that everyone knew was coming. So it's come to this, huh? Shikaku thought with a slight grimace. All of the people in the room remained silent, except the fire daimyo. Couldn't we just wait for Tsunade to awaken? I am sure the matter will fix itself eventually. Kaharu voiced her opinion. My lord, Tsunade is still in a coma. We can't decide on a plan for the village of when she will wake up. Besides, the destruction of Konoha was partially her fault. The fire daimyo sighed as he leaned back into his seat, fanning himself. I'd choose Jiraiya, I liked him, but he's gone now. Seeing Danzo was about to speak, Shikaku intervened, clearly seeing the schemes of the old warhawk. I nominate Kakashi Hitaki. The fire daimyo seemed impressed. Oh ho, the son of the Shiroi Kiba, White Fang, eh? Why not? What do all of you think? Murmurs and whispers went around the council chambers talking about the situation. He's well known, strong and respected, that's true, but he's very young. Minato was even younger. A councilman turned to Shikaku. Who was his teacher? Shikaku replied in a calm demeanor. Everything was swaying in his favor. The Yondaime Hokage. The fire daimyo seemed impressed again. Ah, Kakashi who was taught by the fourth Hokage, taught by Jiraiya who was taught by the Sanninme. It is a fine selection. The old noble added with a smile. The third Hokage's teachings have as good as destroyed the village. The leader of Akatsuki, Pain, was once Jiraiya's pupil. Everyone turned to Danzo who seemed to have opposed the idea, but before he could make headway, it was then that he was cut off. The Sanninme was never wrong in his teachings. Everyone turned to the door to see a newly refreshed Naruto, Kakashi and a blue-haired woman that no one except Danzo recognized. Naruto was holding a large scroll along with Fukasaku-sama resting on his shoulders. This whole invasion is your responsibility, Danzo. If it wasn't for you, Nagato would never have become what he was. He told me everything, how you and Hanzo created an alliance and attacked him, held Konan against him threatening to kill her. When he snapped, he ended up killing his best friend Yahiko. If it wasn't for you, none of this would have happened. You've been a traitor when the Sanninme, my father and Tsunade were in reign, all because you wanted to be Hokage. He said with a glare at Danzo that made him sweat. Everyone was quite shocked at that until Homura and Kaharu stood up slamming their air hands on the desk. They did not want to lose this chance. Namikaze Naruto, you are not permitted to enter the council room. This can be considered an act of insubordination. The elder woman exclaimed. Actually, the fire daimyo spoke with a pleasant smile. I asked for him to come here. That was why this meeting took so long to take place. Seeing the elders' looks, the fire daimyo simply smiled. He is the young man that thwarted an attack by Akatsuki, and also, there is much more to the young man than you people seem to not take notice of. Naruto smiled at the daimyo and received a nod and gesture to continue. Naruto looked at the trio of elders for a moment before smirking. I take it no one here knows what the three of you ordered years ago? He asked rhetorically, making them sweat a little. The three elders felt some unease at the threat, wondering what the spiky-haired blonde knew. Homura decided to put up a brave front, believing that Naruto was just trying to make them nervous. And what is it exactly that you think we have done? Naruto simply smirked. Itachi Uchiha told me everything. That got the attention of everyone. What do you mean? Isn't Itachi Uchiha a missing nin? The daimyo asked, looking between the elders and the Uzumaki. Yes, but on one of my latest missions, I had a little run-in with him. Naruto admitted, remembering the meeting clear as day. Flashback. Naruto was currently jumping from tree to tree on his own when he heard a noise behind him. Jumping down the tree, he skidded up to one to peer around, only to come in eye contact with a pair of Sharingan eyes. Finally, either Sasuke or Itachi, he thought as the figure walked out, revealing itself to be Itachi. Come out, Naruto Uzumaki. Itachi ordered. You know that whole doom and gloom thing suits you well. Naruto said as he appeared in front of him, leaning against a tree as if he wasn't in front of an S-rank missing nin. Itachi chuckled at Naruto's behavior. I take it Jiraiya-sama has spoken to you. Naruto sighed and nodded his head. Before him and the other two teams had been sent out to search for Sasuke, Jiraiya had spoken to him privately about meeting Itachi and explained the Uchiha clan massacre. I gotta say, he started only to close his eyes. My respect for you certainly went up when I heard. At that, Itachi's eyes widened in surprise. Why do you say that? Itachi inquired, truly interested in his reasons. Naruto opened his eyes and looked at Itachi while stepping away from the tree. Killing off your entire family and clan as a mission by the village, that takes guts. I honestly don't think I could ever do that. Hell, I'd rather go rogue than have that on my conscience. Itachi got a small smile on his face hearing that. I understand, but from where I can see it, the village is better off. It would be better if those old crones on the council weren't in it. They're as corrupt as Akatsuki these days. Itachi let a bitter chuckle escape his mouth at that. On to other matters, what would you do should Sasuke attack Konoha? Naruto sighed at that. Honestly. Receiving a nod, he carried on. I know he's your brother, but I'll have to kill him. I once thought of him as a brother. But the day you left and tried to kill me was the day we lost our ties. I don't want to kill him, but should he threaten anyone dear to me, I won't hold back. Itachi, kind of expecting that answer, smiled genuinely at the sincerity, and while he didn't want his little brother killed, he didn't want Konoha destroyed either. I see. What did you want to see me about? Akatsuki, was the answer that caused Naruto's eyes to widen. I have information to pass on to you. Holding up a book that seemed to be big, he threw it to Naruto, who flipped through it and sealed it into a scroll. Is that everything? Naruto asked, only to receive a shake of the head. I have a gift to give you. Itachi then shot forward with his arm outstretched. Before Naruto could do anything, Itachi had grabbed Naruto by the head, where black crows then flew straight into Naruto's mouth, almost making him throw up, forcing to his knees, panting. What the hell was that? Itachi chuckled and said, I'm sorry for the process, but I gave you some of my power, a precaution for the future. I hope you don't have to use it, however. I see, thank you for everything you've done, Weasel-san. He said, using Itachi's old Anbu codename, causing his eyes to widen in surprise. You remember, you're welcome, Naruto-kun, but I must be going now, goodbye. With that, Itachi just vanished into thin air, though Naruto heard the hidden meaning when he said goodbye. He was going to die. Flashback end. These three ordered Itachi Uchiha to kill the entire Uchiha clan. They may have had their reasons, but there were many ways that the issue could have been resolved instead of mindless slaughter. He said, pointing to Danzo and the two elders. That's not all Danzo has done. Where is your proof? Danzo asked as he narrowed his lone eye. Naruto simply put his hand on Konan's shoulders. This is Konan, friend of Yahiko and Nagato. I'm sure you remember her, Danzo. Danzo started to sweat at that. I have never seen her before. Well, if that doesn't suit you, how does this do? You were also responsible in delaying my return, Danzo. Naruto mentioned, his frown forming deeper. With my delay, Pain was free to do as he pleased. He terrorized and killed many of our troops, and those that didn't know my whereabouts back then were incapacitated or even killed. Did you know how many lives could have ended then? I know you've been hungering for power for years. Tsunade explained to me your reasons why you still run Root, and how she fervently opposed any idea and suggestion you had given. This proof shall be all that's needed. He raised a crystal ball to Fukasaku's hands and the small toad held it firmly with his tiny hands. Jiraiya-chan explained to me once that the Hokage's office is filled with seals that the Sandaime Hokage installed without anyone's knowledge other than his own and with Jiraiya-chan's. He said to me that the seals were there to record in the crystal ball the events that occur whenever the Hokage was not around. The trigger of that seal would be the seal etched onto every Hokage that set foot in that office, through their clothing or otherwise. It was then that Naruto unfurled the gigantic scroll, and in it was the list of the active toads that reside in Myobokuzen. When we left the village to train Naruto, we left here with a summoner toad to send Naruto back to the village if ever he was needed. If one of ours were killed, their names would be erased from the active scroll. This is what happened in the events that Pain started his invasion of Konoha. They saw a picture of Danzo with his back turned from the viewers and saw that the man stabbed the summoning toad with a tanto. Homura and Kaharu looked at each other and then to the fire daimyo, who frowned. Quite. It seemed that the reason why Naruto-kun was sent back later than expected was indeed because of Danzo. Even if Naruto weren't to return, Pain would have attacked nonetheless. I think I may have an idea of who is to become the next Hokage. But first, Naruto started as he turned back to Danzo. You must pay for your crimes. He knew this was the only way to stop the man from being Hokage and gaining more power. If he had to kill the man, then so be it. Danzo, however, stood up, interrupting everyone's thoughts. You think I will simply surrender like this? How foolish. He exclaimed as two figures appeared in front of him. Fu, Torun. Cover me. I'm going to release the seal on my arm. He slipped of his bandages to reveal a cast of some kind on his arm. It's a good thing I recalled these two when Pain attacked. With my Sharingan and Mokuton I will control the Kyuubi. I knew this would happen. Naruto said sadly, shaking his head. Naruto held his hand out, which was shimmering with wind, at the two Root members and said, Futon. Tenrin. Wind release. Orchid Sky. A widening tornado-like blast was fired towards both Anbu before they could even move and were sent flying through the wall to the village center where everyone was located. I apologize for the disturbance, Daimyo-sama, but I must make sure the peace in Konoha is maintained at any cost, Naruto said as he smiled at the now stiff elders and Danzo. Anbu. Straight away a couple Anbu shone up beside Naruto as if already seeing him as their leader, which made the daimyo secretly smile at. Take those two to the cells underground, I have a worm to dispose of. Both Anbu grabbed the elders roughly, who started to shout in outrage before the Anbu vanished along with them. Naruto then turned to Shikaku. Shikaku-san, make sure the villagers and shinobi are away from this battle, and make sure Daimyo-sama is safe. Shikaku gave a nod before some loyal shinobi appeared and escorted everyone away. Naruto looked at Kakashi. Inform my friends about everything and to stay out of it unless I'm in danger. He ordered, since he didn't know if the changes to him and added knowledge would now affect him, though he supposed if it did affect him, it would be in a good way. Kakashi gave a nod and vanished. Konan-san, he said, getting her attention. I need you to be my backup, you could say this is a trial partnership. He finished with a smirk while she gave a nod and a small smile. Danzo threw down the metal cast and revealed his right arm, covered in numerous Sharingan. Implanted Sharingan. You sick son of a bitch. You order them to be murdered and then you dissected their bodies? Naruto asked him with a look of disgust. It was for the greater good. Danzo replied casually. You and your greater good has brought nothing but murder to Konoha. Even other countries have been affected because of you and your bullshit. Naruto vanished before appearing with his fist in Danzo's jaw, sending him through the wall, crashing into the center of the village as the council chamber was close by. Konoha Crater. Naruto jumped through the wall followed by Konan and started walking towards Danzo, who was standing up. Looking around, he noticed how every single living person was circled around the massive crater to see the battle. Sideline. What's Naruto doing now? Tenten exclaimed with a bit of exasperation at seeing the start of another battle. Kakashi then just appeared in front of everyone and explained everything about what happened in the council chambers, about how Danzo and Hanzo both attacked Nagato, leading him to creating Akatsuki, and about delaying Naruto's arrival. He left the part of the Uchiha massacre out though, as it was sensitive information. But everyone knew that Danzo was a complete traitor, so they just watched Naruto kick ass. Is Naruto fit for battle? Ino asked with a slightly worried look. I don't know, but Konan is with him right now, so he should be safe. Kakashi said, willing to trust her. How do we know we can trust her? Shino asked Kakashi. Kakashi glanced at him and noted most were looking at him. Naruto trusts her, and that's all I need to believe in her, he answered. Everyone gave slight nods of acknowledgement at that and looked down at the crater once more. All the civilians were a bit excited at seeing their hero fight, as they were unable to the first time. It was also better when they knew he was getting rid of a traitor. They always felt something dark coming from Danzo whenever they had walked past him or simply had a meeting with the man. Battlefield. Why don't you just give up now, Danzo? Naruto asked. He knew a battle with Danzo would be dangerous, as he was a tricky man. Huh, you think after everything I've accomplished that I would just give up like that? You're just like that fool of a father of yours and the Sanninme. Danzo sneered in disgust. Naruto chuckled at that confusing Danzo. You say I'm like my father, then good. My father fought for his home. He sacrificed his life to make sure that we all go on to prosper. The Sanninme was a great man as well. He protected his home for many years. And what did you accomplish? Some freak experiments. You're nothing but a second Orochimaru. Naruto exclaimed as his face was turning into more of a frown each time. Everything I have done was to ensure the survival of Konoha. Danzo said resolutely, believing every experiment, every failure and new addition to his body was for Konoha's future. No, everything you have done is the cause of Akatsuki, this invasion. Everything is your fault, and you say it was for the survival of Konoha? Everything you did was for your own sake, for power, for the title of Hokage. The Shoden and Nidaime entrusted Konoha to us, to protect and help make it prosper into something only they could dream of. And you spit on their graves with every action you commit. Naruto yelled, showing anger. Even Danzo didn't know he had. Never mind the entire crowd that was impressed with what he said. The title of Hokage is earned. There are no shortcuts to that title, and earning it by making people feel fear, it's pathetic. Sideline. Wow, I've never heard him so angry before. Anko said as Naruto's anger actually sent a shiver down her spine. It's because of how loyal he is to Konoha, Inoichi said, who was stood next Ino. And the title of Hokage. Kakashi said, who had his book nowhere to be seen, as he wanted to see how strong Naruto had become. What do you mean? Lee asked. The title of Hokage is something Naruto had dreamt of his whole life. The fact that someone uses unethical means and uses fear to gain the Hokage position. Sakura said as she had come to see the commotion while Shizune stayed with Tsunade. Well, remind me not to get him angry, Ino said as she was slightly freaked when Naruto's anger could be felt. Battlefield. Enough talk, Uzumaki, Danzo shouted before going through hand seals with such speed that Naruto doubted he would have made them out if not for the training he had been through. Futon. Shinkagyoku. Wind release. Vacuum sphere. 5 balls of wind shot out of Danzo's mouth at Naruto at high velocity. Naruto shifted his feet as the balls of wind came at him and quickly utilized his shunpo to flash step between each orb of wind, leaving them to crash into the ground, ripping it up and leaving craters. Naruto, however, landed past all of the craters on one foot before suddenly vanishing again, and before Danzo could react, the blonde was in front of him, punching forward. Ikatsu. Single bone. Naruto's fist slammed into Danzo's midsection, getting globs of blood spat out of the man before the ground was ripped up and Danzo was thrown across the field while spitting up blood with each bounce. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he started thinking that was too easy when his instinct suddenly kicked in and he ducked a kick aimed for his head. Seeing it was Danzo, he jumped back to a safe distance. There's no way you could be unarmed from that punch. I created that while I was with Arrow Sennin, and it has literally ripped bandits and the in two. Naruto exclaimed as he looked to where he saw Danzo land, only for there to be nothing wrong with him. What are your tricks? He thought, while everyone who heard realized he had killed long before he had even returned to the village. Though if it was his first kill they didn't know, but it was still shocking seeing this new side of Naruto. You can't hope to defeat me, Danzo exclaimed. That strength was just like Tsunadeheim's, only that was pure physical strength. What else are you hiding, Naruto? Naruto charged at Danzo with incredible speed with a spinning ball of chakra in hand. Rasengan. Driving the jutsu into Danzo's gut, he was happy to see the man get blasted along the ground surrounded by the chakra of his jutsu before coming to a stop in an explosion. Naruto, who was completely focused on Danzo, did not see the fist that impacted with his face, sending him tumbling across the ground. Gripping the floor on a tumble, he eventually stopped and flipped up to his feet and looked up to Danzo stood there, not even a hair out of place. Konan, seeing Naruto could be in trouble, jumped into the air where her legs started turning into paper before they attached to her back, creating large wings. Flapping them slightly, she aimed them at Danzo before unleashing a barrage of shuriken from them. Kami shuriken. Paper shuriken. Thousands upon thousands of paper shuriken rained down on Danzo, which started kicking up dust while destroying the ground in the process. Stopping the assault, she flew close to Naruto as he simply stared intently at Danzo's figure that started showing through the dust. The dust eventually dispersed, revealing a completely unharmed Danzo. That's not possible. What's his secret? Were both shinobi thoughts. Sideline. Is he invincible? Kiba asked, wide-eyed at the fact that Danzo was alive. I didn't see anything strange happen. Kakashi said as he had his Sharingan out watching the match. Yamato, who had come just in case Naruto lost control, also looked bewildered. He had never heard of such a thing that made someone practically intangible to allow attacks pass through them. Danzo had more up his sleeves than any of us realized. I can't sense any genjutsu coming off of him either. Kurenai said with a frown. She only hoped Naruto could figure it out before he got into any more trouble. She may not have been close to the young man, but Asuma had spoken highly of him. That was all she needed to know. He was a good person despite his past reputation. A gurgle caught her attention and she looked down to the 3-month-old child in her arms. Her and Asuma's son. Kurenai had been 3 months pregnant before Naruto had arrived back in the village. By the time he'd left to train in senjutsu, she'd just had the baby, and when he'd returned he'd been 3 months old. She smiled as she combed his black hair back, glad he hadn't been hurt in the invasion. All we can do, I hope that Naruto can figure it out. Guy said with rare seriousness. Battlefield. Naruto activated his Sennin Moto, which had been able to be replenished, however he had no clones to store it up once it ran out. Jumping as high as the Hokage mountain, he put his hands in a familiar hand seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow clone technique. A single clone popped up beside him. He then held out his hand and charged a regular Rasengan in his hand before his clone moved his hands above the ball and started pumping futon chakra into it. Danzo looked up as he saw the Rasengan start to change to more of a bright blue with white in the center. Forming around it was what resembled an Fuma shuriken, only this one was extremely large, and then came the bell-like screech that echoed over the entire village. Suddenly all of the wind started to pick up around Naruto, creating a mini tornado that cut through the air like blades of wind. Is that the next stage of the Rasengan? Danzo asked in wonder. Naruto looked down at Danzo with an amused expression. It's one of them, he said, making Danzo's eyebrows raise. One of them? What does that mean? Sideline. There is no way Danzo could avoid that, Ino said as she eyed the amazing jutsu. The very same one she saw completely cut Kakuzu up like he was nothing. We can only hope he doesn't. If he survives that without a scratch, it may be incredibly hard to actually hit him. Shikamaru said as he observed the jutsu and knew such a jutsu that causes widespread destruction should hurt Danzo, as they had all seen the damage it could do. Battlefield. It was at that moment Naruto's clone grabbed the real one and spun him around before launching him at Danzo. As Naruto soared at Danzo, he shouted out, Futon. Rasen Shuriken. Wind release. Spiraling shuriken. With a thrust of his arm, the spinning ball of chakra left Naruto's hand, sending it soaring at Danzo, who stood there unmoving whatsoever. He threw it. I have no choice but to use Izanagi again. Danzo thought as the jutsu eventually hit Danzo's head on, creating a bombardment of light as the ball exploded, creating a massive dome of wind and chakra that covered a good portion of land. The dome, just like the jutsu itself, started spinning around, tearing the ground apart before it started to shrink in on itself before blowing up, sending rock, smoke, wind and even chakra everywhere. When the rocks and dust cleared, there stood a perfect Danzo in the center of a crater, not harmed in the least. It's no use, Uzumaki. Even with all of your abilities and Kyuubi, you cannot hope to defeat me here. Surrender and I will not punish you." Naruto stood there in shock at the fact that he survived such a jutsu with no problem at all. It was then that by using his Sage mode he noticed how every time he landed a hit there would be a distortion in the air. Looking at Danzo closely he noticed a Sharingan eye on his arm shut. Looking even closer he saw there were 4 shut. "I see it, every time I land an attack on you, one of those eyes shut, indicating you're using some sort of genjutsu to escape. Up to now I've killed you 4 times. Only 7 more to go, be prepared." "Well done, it seems you're not as stupid as I thought. Izanagi is capable of turning injuries and even death inflicted upon me into mere illusions. Whenever I receive a fatal injury, I can make my body fade away as a genjutsu. I can then allow my body to return back to reality, unscathed and physically real. It was deemed a forbidden jutsu because when someone uses it they go automatically blind, hence my arm," he said mockingly. Internally however he was a bit worried. If he could figure that out, then I have to be careful, he could kill me. Sideline. To think the Uchiha had such a jutsu. Kakashi said in awe of the ability. Yes, but the repercussions of using it are dangerous. Neji said, he was glad he had the Byakugan as with that they never had any problems like Uchiha. So now Naruto-kun knows the theory of it, it shouldn't be that hard, given his destructive jutsu and enormous chakra reserves, he could last a while. Hinata said, hoping that Naruto would defeat this man. We can only hope it will be easy, we still don't know everything about him. Shino said using his intelligence with the fact that Danzo was a crafty man. Battlefield. Naruto then realized he only had to kill him 7 more times before he could finish him off for good. All he had to do was conserve his chakra. Konan, I need some wind, he told his new comrade. He received a nod as she landed back down next to Naruto. It's time I used some of the new jutsu I now know. Both Naruto and Konan started going through hand seals. Kaden. Dai Enden. Fire release. Big flame bullet. Out of Naruto's mouth came an extreme amount of fire that spread out across the land. Those in the crowd could feel the intensity and Danzo had to squint his eyes so to not get the heat to affect his eye. Futon. Atsugai. Wind release. Pressure damage. Konan spat out a large tornado that started to expand rapidly before it merged with Naruto's jutsu, causing the flame to become so intense that it enveloped the entire area around where the two were fighting. The fire spread completely over Danzo, however instead of staying in the same place as always he used Izanagi and appeared behind Naruto, which the young man had noticed and was about to attack but was too slow as Danzo already had his jutsu as the ready. Futon. Shinku Taigoku. Wind release. Vacuum grade sphere. The ball of wind slammed into Naruto's gut, sending him flying along the crater while hitting the ground every so often. He eventually came to a stop and stood up slowly. Looking at his top he noticed it was torn to shreds, so without further ado he ripped it off, revealing his new toned body, though even before the change he was toned. Naruto then looked at Danzo's arm and saw 5 eyes now shut. Only 6 to go, you sure you can last that long, old man? Naruto taunted. It was at that moment Naruto's Sage mode deactivated as he had used all of his natural chakra, now he was stuck with his normal chakra. Anytime now would be perfect for the Rinnegan to activate. He thought with a hopeful plea. You should be more worried about yourself, Kyuubi, or more about your new friend here. Danzo spoke with a gleam as he pulled out his blade that was hidden in his cane and went for a stab at Konan as he appeared behind her. It never pierced however as another blade blocked it. Looking at it he saw how the sword was a work of beauty. It looked like a normal katana with the exception of the guard, which was in the shape of a 4-pointed bronze-colored star. Its hilt was light blue. Looking up the sword he saw Naruto holding it with a frown. Sorry, not gonna happen, Naruto said as he swung his new Zanpakuto, parrying the attack which caused Danzo to stumble at the sudden power. The old shinobi then saw a glint of metal coming down at him which he quickly rolled out of the way of, barely missing it. Naruto turned to Konan. Are you okay? He asked with a worried look. Konan gave him a smile for caring even though it was her mistake. Yeah, sorry, I slipped up. Naruto just grinned at her. Don't worry about it. He turned back to Danzo while placing his sword back in its sheath safely. You're gonna pay for that, using cheap tricks and attacking someone else when you're meant to be fighting me. Danzo snorted at the accusation. We're shinobi. We do what we have to win. If it meant attacking her to get to you, then so be it. If I had to, I'd attack any of your friends if it forced you to finally show me your true power. Seeing Naruto's eyes flash a light violet for a second, he smirked, though he wondered why it wasn't red. What will it be, Naruto Uzumaki? Will you allow your friends to be hurt simply because you wouldn't reveal what you could really do? Or will you continue to play this child's game? Something within Naruto seemed to snap at the very idea of Danzo hurting another one of his friends. As if a switch had been turned on inside of his head, information suddenly assaulted him. And finally, the lock that had been holding his new abilities away had finally been unlocked from his powerful emotions. Closing his eyes as wisps of chakra leaked out of him, he accessed all of the information in barely a second. Everything he needed to finally use Nagato's gift. Rinnegan. His eyes snapped open as a burst of silver chakra exploded out of him. Every single pair of eyes went wide in shock, awe, bewilderment, amazement, and so many more emotions ranging from person to person. Even Danzo couldn't but step back in shock at Naruto's new eyes. He had been expecting the Kyuubi's powers when he taunted him, hell, he had hoped, but now, he didn't know if his Sharingan would be enough to go up against the eyes of Rikudō Sennin. His bright blue eyes had been replaced by a ripple-like pattern around the pupil, with a light purple iris and sclera that seemed to glow. Looking down at his hands, he was slightly surprised to find sliver chakras swirling around his fingers. Silver chakra? I didn't know such a thing was possible. It was blue a moment ago. Is this an effect of the Rinnegan? This is my first time using it obviously, but I don't remember Nagato having silver chakra. He shook his head. I can't think about that right now, maybe later, but at the moment, I need to kill Danzo. Impossible. Danzo muttered as Naruto looked him in the eye with those rippled eyes that seemed to glow an ethereal purple. You shouldn't have those eyes. Danzo shouted, losing his composure. You're correct, Naruto admitted. I shouldn't have these eyes, but I do. You can say they're a gift from a friend. He smirked as he stopped exuding chakra and pulled it all back in. Bending down slightly, he pushed up, jumping high while doing a couple flips before he came back to the ground and slammed his fist down upon it. Nothing happened for a second before the ground exploded, sending rocks and stone into the air. Seeing that the rocks were in front of him, he held out his hand to use his new knowledge and eyes. Shinra Tensei. Almighty push. Every rock and stone flew at Danzo at such speed he was forced to use Izanagi again, which kind of annoyed him as this match was getting to close. Sideline. How does Naruto have those eyes? Ino asked with wide eyes as she looked at Naruto's rippled ones. Kakashi glanced at her and sighed. He agreed to have them transplanted into his own eyes. Seeing the alarmed and horror-stricken faces, he held up a hand to stop them from saying anything. His unique healing managed to reform, I guess you could say, his regular blue eyes. However, within those eyes is the Rinnegan merged with his chakra network, body and even mind. He's still all Naruto, don't worry, only now he's stronger than he has ever been. He looked back at the blonde. Then again, I don't know just how strong you were in the first place, well, not personally. Sakura smiled as she saw Naruto's new eyes. You've really gone far, Naruto. She sighed slightly, knowing she too would have to become stronger if she wanted to keep up with him. An interesting strategy. Shikamaru said with an approving nod while ignoring the reason for Naruto's new eyes for the moment. How so? Choji asked. Kakashi decided to explain instead. By kicking up all of the rocks, it blocks Danzo's view of Naruto, allowing him to surprise Danzo with any jutsu. It is more a surprise act if anything. Naruto is surely picking through all of the Sharingan on that fossil's arm. Kiba grinned as Akamaru barked in agreement. Battlefield. And that's 6, just 5 left. Naruto said mockingly as he saw Danzo scowl. Don't be so arrogant, boy. I still have a few tricks up my sleeve. He said with a smirk as Naruto cocked an eyebrow. You do know you won't make it out of this village alive? Naruto asked rhetorically. I am the only one who can save this village. I will do whatever I have to do to acquire peace. Even if I die, there will be others like me. I am not doing this for me, and I'm doing this to help save the entire world. Danzo exclaimed. No, the way you treat human life, someone like you could never obtain peace the right way. You would only inspire fear in people's hearts to do your lowly bidding. You may call the Sandame's ideals along with every other past Hokage's ideals foolish, but it was those same ideals that have made this nation so strong. It is what has made this village what it is. It is what has made us able to prosper and to be able to rise from the ashes time and time again. I don't care if I die, I've been ready for it ever since I learned of Kyuubi. If I have to die to stop you, then so be it. I'll gladly welcome it, knowing I am doing the world some good," Naruto exclaimed, which made everyone's respect for him go up at hearing his declaration, especially all of the civilians who ever thought of him as a demon. They couldn't believe their foolishness in believing such a thing. Sideline. He sounded just like a Hokage. Kurenai mused, shifting her son in her arms. Well, it is his goal in life. Kakashi said. Who knows, maybe he will achieve that goal. Yamato said, who had appeared a couple minutes ago as he had been helping with securing the daimyo from hostile forces. With the daimyo, Shikaku and the Anbu had moved the daimyo to a secure location near the Hokage mountain, but in clear view of watching the battle, and they couldn't help but admire Naruto's strength throughout the whole battle. His speech had made them all gain a lot of respect for him, as he seemed like the best choice for Hokage if he ever had the opportunity. The daimyo himself was very impressed with the young man. Never before had he met someone with such a strong will, or in this case a will of fire. I think I know the best candidate for Hokage, he mused, while Shikaku, who heard it, smiled, happy Naruto may get his chance. Battlefield. Danzo himself felt a bit of respect for the man, but he had to do this his own way. In his mind, only his ideals will truly work. I see, then I expect a good battle from you. Danzo then went through some hand seals that Naruto knew thanks to Nagato, but Danzo couldn't do it, could he? Mokuton. Daijiren no Jutsu. Wood release. Great forest technique, thrusting his arm forward, a massive tree shot from it which continued to grow rapidly, heading straight for Naruto, who was too shocked at the moment to speak, so it surprised him when he was hit in the chest and sent sliding back. The wood was about to wrap around Naruto until paper flew at the tree and tore it apart, leaving nothing but the part that was attached to Danzo. Konan landed next to Naruto and helped him stand up properly. Impossible. You shouldn't have the Mokuton element, you're not even a Senju, Naruto said as he stood up while rubbing his chest as it hurt from the attack. That's right, I'm not a Senju, there are other means to gain the element, you should know that, Danzo said with a smirk as realization dawned on Naruto's face before it turned into a scowl. You bastard, you sick bastard? Naruto screamed, startling quite a few people, not understanding what was going on. How could you? Don't you have any morals? Like I said before, it was all needed in order to bring peace to this tainted world. Danzo said calmly. You call digging up graves and experimenting with bodies the way you intend to gain peace? Some in the crowd, especially the shinobi, realized what it was Danzo had done and couldn't believe someone would do that. Sideline. What does Naruto mean by digging up graves? Ino asked. He means that Danzo had defiled the Shoden's grave and stolen his genes to acquire the Mokuton element. Yamato explained. No one could believe that someone would do such a thing. Yamato, however, was aware people would stoop to that level. Orochimaru was a prime example since he was an experiment. But, I didn't think you could extract someone's bloodline and implant it into someone else? Choji asked as he was a bit confused. It's possible, Yamato said as he thought to what had been done to him. Orochimaru experimented on me when I was a child with the Shoden's bloodline. I was 1 out of 50 children. The only one to survive and accept the bloodline as part of me. Transferring of a bloodline is one of the most dangerous experiment people can do. Everyone was again shocked that such a thing had happened to him when he was just a child. Anko, though, didn't seem surprised when he mentioned Orochimaru, as that was something he would do. Battlefield. You wouldn't understand, you haven't seen the evils of this world. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Naruto growled in the back of his throat at the audacity this man, and thinking he could do anything and get away with it. I'm seriously getting pissed off with you. Enough talk, the more I hear the more I feel disgusted with you. Flipping through hand seals, he called out a jutsu that he'd once seen before and now knew how to do it. Hayaten. Kokuryu Bofusetsu. Ice release. Black Dragon Blizzard. Punching forward, a black ether-like dragon emerged from it and soared to the heavens before it flew down at Danzo, hitting the ground, causing ice to spread out everywhere, while parts of the dragon left ice spikes sticking out of the ground. Danzo reappeared to the right of Naruto and thrust his tanto forward at Naruto's waist. It would have hit had Naruto not twisted out of the way and kicked Danzo in the face, causing him to back up slightly. And that's a 7. Naruto said with a smirk as he jumped back in midair and held out his hand whilst remembering Gurren and accessing his mind to gain the information of one of her jutsu in all but a second. Kesho. Kyodai Rakaku Shuriken. Crystal. Giant hexagonal shuriken. A giant crystal shuriken, resembling a snowflake, materialized in front of Naruto's hand and started spinning rapidly before it shot off at such speed that the ground beneath it gained cuts just from the force cast from it. The giant crystal shuriken struck Danzo, cutting him in half before it hit the ground behind him, shattering upon impact. The two halves of Danzo faded away before they hit the ground. Naruto was slightly surprised when he heard a voice behind him. Futon. Shinku Renpa. Wind release. Vacuum serial waves. A blast of wind struck his back as several blades of wind struck him before he struck the ground hard while bleeding from numerous cuts. Standing up, everyone could see he had blood coming out of many areas of his body. However, it didn't seem to affect him as most of the cuts started to heal themselves up. That's 8 now, I'm close, but my chakra is running low. Naruto thought, since it was his first time using the Rinnegan and all of the new elements that seemed to be popping into his head more frequently since the activation. His chakra had been draining much quicker. That healing of yours is quite annoying and tiring, Danzo said as he saw how Naruto's wounds would heal up like he was grazed. Perks of being a sage and a Jinchuriki. Danzo then pulled out a kunai and said, Fuku Naikiri. Wind kunai blade. Taking a deep breath, he blew wind on the kunai, making a blade appear that resembled a scimitar. Despite its addition, it still weighed the exact same. Naruto flew through hand seals. Suiden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. Water release. Water dragon bullet technique. A water dragon formed out of thin air in front of Naruto as he took advantage of his original Suiden affinity. The dragon let out a roar before it flew at Danzo, hitting him dead on, showering the immediate area in water. Danzo, though, used one more Izanagi to appear behind Naruto and stab him through the chest, just missing his heart. Everyone looked on in shock at what happened. Naruto had a blade pierced through his chest while the blood dripped off the end of the blade. Konan looked murderous at Danzo for managing to fatally injure the legacy of Yahiko, Nagato and Jiraiya sensei while everyone had wide eyes. Naruto himself was simply too shocked to do anything except look down at the blade as it jutted through his chest, blood dripping on the end. He couldn't believe he'd been struck though, he hadn't even seen the old man move, let alone appear behind. Danzo pulled the blade out, releasing a torrent of blood as it poured out of the blonde's chest. Snorting to himself, he kicked Naruto in the back, sending him across the ground until the blonde came to the point when he just stopped, unmoving. Everyone's heart stopped though, thinking he was dead. Konan paper shunshined to Naruto's body and rolled him over, revealing he was still alive as his chest was heaving but blood dribbled down his chin. Naruto, we have to get you out of here, she told him, noticing he was losing blood quickly. Naruto, however, just stood up on shaky legs and shook his head. No, you need to get away, I'm going to kill him. Konan grabbed his chin in worry, making him face her. Do not be reckless, you need medical attention. She couldn't believe how alike he was to Yahiko and Nagato the more time she spent with him. It was getting frustrating. Naruto smiled and glanced over to Danzo. No, I need to do this now, otherwise we may never get another chance, he told her firmly. Konan sighed and let go of him. Don't die, I've already lost everyone else, she practically demanded before she vanished, only to reappear with everyone else on the sidelines. As soon as she was gone, Naruto stumbled and gripped his chest. Looking down, he winced seeing a blade-size hole through his chest and back. Damn, didn't think I'd get this injured. I would have been able to deflect him with Shinra Tensei, but I don't know if I have the chakra right now, especially since I have some new silver chakra that I don't know the capabilities of. He grit his teeth as he looked up, only to have his eyes widen as everything around froze as if time stopped. What the? His eyes went wider though when he saw snow falling from the sky and an icy chill drifting through the air. Feeling a loss of weight at his side, he looked down at his waist to find his sword dissolving into ice particles and floating to the area in front of him, where some kind of creature began to form before his very eyes. What is this? He asked himself, confused at what was going on. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Naruto looked ahead of him and his jaw dropped. Before his eyes, gigantic, icy blue, serpentine dragon with large wings floated and looked down at him with bluish-white eyes. You are the first person in many generations to have ever impressed me. More importantly, you're the only person in many generations that could use me to their fullest. Naruto still stared in shock at the dragon before finally responding. Why you're Hiranmaru? He asked. Since his sword has just turned into a dragon, it was the only possible excuse. Yes, the dragon answered. I show myself now because I can heal you, and I don't wish to have the first person able to wield me in many years to die. I would have usually allowed you to use my powers, however at the moment my powers may cause your body too much harm. The dragon blew out a cool air from its large mouth onto Naruto before speaking again. Healing is all I can do right now. I have just transferred my own chakra into you to replenish your reserves. This may be classed as cheating to some, but I wish for you to live. The dragon started to slowly break away. When it's time, I will appear once again. Until then I wish to see some good things from you. And just like that, Hiranmaru was gone, returning into his sword that found its way back at his side. Naruto blinked at what he was told before looking back down at his injury to find it perfectly healed. Closing his eyes, he was surprised to actually find his chakra reserves filled up, making him feel more alive than he had in a while, especially from the feel of the Rinnegan's silver chakra. Opening his eyes, he was once more surprised to find Danzo and everyone else stood unfrozen and staring at him in shock and awe. How? Danzo questioned with a look of disbelief. How do you not have a scratch on you? Naruto grinned as he gripped Hiranmaru's handle, making Konan quirk an eyebrow from where she stood. You could say I had inside help. He answered cryptically. Kyuubi. Danzo muttered, believing the beast healed him instantly. He never paid attention to the snow that was still on the ground and simply believed it was from Naruto's earlier jutsu. Your time is up, Danzo. You have 2 Izanagi left. What can you possibly achieve? Naruto asked as he moved himself into a stance. Danzo though just laughed. Ha ha ha, this is perfect. Didn't you ever think of what would happen when you used Kyuubi's chakra when I have the Sharingan and Mokuton that can control the Kyuubi? He shouted since he still believed Naruto sued the Kyuubi's chakra to heal himself. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at the delusional man. Even if I did use Kyuubi's chakra, do you honestly believe that you can control me? A person with the Rinnegan? The very dojutsu that the Sharingan was born from? Naruto asked, accessing the little knowledge that Nagato had known about the dojutsu he now owned. Enough, I will finally control you. Danzo said as he went, though he hand seals that will allow him to use the jutsu will finally have Naruto under his thumb. Hokage Shiki Jijun Jutsu, Kakuon Nitten Suishu. Hokage style 60-year-old technique. Kakuon entering society with bliss, bringing hands, slamming his hands on the ground. Wooden poles shot up from the ground that looked like totem poles with mouths on them like an animal. A blue chakra string then attached itself from Danzo's hands to Naruto's chest where he wore Tsunade's necklace. As Danzo was trying to pull the Kyuubi's chakra, he found that nothing was happening. Looking at Naruto, he saw a feral smirk that nearly made him piss himself. I told you, Naruto exclaimed before unleashing an invisible blast of chakra that sent Danzo skidding and breaking the wooden pillars. Naruto looked down at Danzo with a smile. On my training trip with Jiraiya, I did much more than what was recorded. Whereas you probably believe all we did was focus on my basic training, taijutsu, and improving my Rasengan with a bit of controlling Kyuubi's chakra on the side, we did much more than that. Naruto held up his hand that now lit up with lightning and thrust it to the sky, sending an orb of lightning into the sky which gathered clouds almost immediately. Everyone looked up to see the clouds gather and lightning streak across them, gathering at a certain point. On our first year away, we discovered I had 3 affinities. I know, it's shocking, the dead last having 3 element affinities. He grinned at Danzo's and everyone else's shocked looks. Wind, water and lightning were the elements I had an affinity for. We knew we didn't have much time to master each element with the time limit we had, so we worked on my Raiden and Suiden the most. I'll admit that mastering those 2 elements was no walk in the park. It was hard, extremely so, but I did it. In the end at least. In those 3 years I learned, created and mastered jutsu for each element. I was even capable of combining the 2 elements to form the Ranten, storm release, element. I'd figured that this element was a Kekkei Genkei, but Ero Sennin explained that some sub-elements can be created if the person's chakra nature was strong enough. As I'm sure you know, Danzo, Ranten allows a person to basically control the weather if the user has enough control over the element. He looked up to the cloudy sky that was practically glowing with lightning. This is one of my Raiden jutsu that I created. By using Ranten I can form storm clouds above us. Danzo grit his teeth as the lightning got even more powerful in the sky. Why would you hide such abilities? Danzo questioned. So that the Akatsuki and people like you wouldn't know my true strength. I pretended to be dumb, most of time, so I didn't give away just how much I'd improved because I knew someone like you would hurt my precious people to get to me for whatever reasons. Naruto explained as he looked back up at the lightning that was ready to burst. He closed his eyes as he remembered the first time he used the jutsu. Flashback. A 14-year-old Naruto Uzumaki stared ahead of him at a large bandit camp that contained at least 40 to 50 bandits. Each and every one of them had been pillaging and destroying villages. That wasn't all though, they had been kidnapping women of all ages, be it a mere 10-year-old child or 80-year-old woman. It was times like these, or to be more precise, people like this, that made him want to say fuck it and let the Kyuubi take over for a while just to make sure they all die painfully. Because no way in hell could these people have any humanity in them. He had sent a couple squads of clones into the large camp to retrieve all of the prisoners whilst the bandits were asleep or elsewhere. A minute ago he had received confirmation from one of the clones that all of the prisoners had been retrieved, and now he was simply standing there, preparing himself for what he was about to do. Closing his eyes, he pumped Raiden chakra into his right hand, which soon sparked a light almost like Chidori before he snapped his eyes open and flung his hand into the sky, sending the gathered lightning to the night sky where it suddenly just stopped. After a moment, clouds began to be pulled towards the lightning he'd thrown up and began swarming it. As a large amount of clouds gathered together above the camp, lightning flickered and thunder roared with each passing second. It seemed the bandits had heard the commotion in the sky because they began appearing from their many tents and structures to see the sky above them, littered with storm clouds and a buildup of lightning in the center of it, flickering with its natural energy as if it was going to pop. Huh? What the hell is that? What the fuck is going on? Holy shit, is that lightning building up? Oi, the women are gone. What? Shit, one problem after another, now what are we gonna fuck? Oi, there's a kid up there. He must be the cause. What? Kill the little fucker then. I want me a woman to enjoy tonight. You heard the man, kill that kid. Fools. Naruto muttered, shaking his head as he looked up at the lightning ready to burst. The last thing you monsters will see, is the light. With a swipe of his hand down to the ground he uttered. Raiden. Sarauchi. Lightning release. Skyfall. All the bandits stopped their charge when they heard the sound of a boom and a flash of light. They barely had time to look up before the lightning struck the center of the bandits and enveloped the area in a blinding light with lightning arcing all around it. The blast continued to grow, vaporizing the buildings and tents before the blast even touched them and reducing the bandits to ash in the wind. A minute later, when the light died down and only smoke remained, there was no camp, nor any sign of anything being left. In fact, it was all just one massive smoking crater with lightning residue zipping along it. With a sigh and closed eyes, Naruto turned around and walked away, hoping to never meet anyone like them again. Flashback end. Coming out of his memories, Naruto held his hand out towards Danzo. Raiden. Sarauchi. Lightning release. Skyfall. With a slash of his hand, the jutsu Jiraiya had dubbed S rank, was sent soaring towards the earth in the blink of an eye and struck down on Danzo's position, destroying the entire area in a bright flash of light that sent a column of smoke and lightning into the sky. Naruto had to utilize several quick shunpos to avoid getting struck by the blast as it enveloped a good portion of the crater. Normally it would have managed to wipe out a good percentage of the village had the village still been standing, but since they were in the crater and away from most of the tents and structure that had been built, he decided to use, if only to show he wasn't the weak person he once was. The entire crowd watching had to cover their eyes as chakra, wind, dust, lightning and stone blew in their direction, blocking their view. The dust cloud eventually settled down, revealing a slightly panting Danzo as he was now down to one Sharingan eye in his arm and the one in his eye. Using all his jutsus had also tired him out as he was low on chakra. And then there were two. Are you ready to give up yet? Naruto asked with a slight growl, as he counted the one his eye now as a possible candidate for Izanagi. Danzo growled at Naruto at having been beaten this far, further than anyone had ever gotten. You think you've beaten me, child? You haven't even come close. I will not die here today. Danzo shouted, flipping through hand seals. Futon. Shinku Taigoku. Wind release. Vacuum Great Sphere. An incredible amount of wind compressed into a ball was shot at Naruto, who simply used his Rinnegan's telekinesis ability to knock it away with a wave of his hand before it could even reach him, sending the compressed orb of wind to another part of the crater where it exploded on contact. Naruto then jumped up high while using his powers over gravity to stay afloat longer before holding out his hand, which started to gather chakra together, making it a silver chakra ball instead of blue. Dropping down, he charged down at Danzo. Rikudō Rasengan. Six Paths Rasengan. The shining silver ball of chakra impacted where Danzo stood, causing one more explosion that blew the earth away before Naruto leapt back to safety. Once again Danzo was panting, only now he had no eyes open on his arm. Danzo pulled his hand up to the bandages on his face and tore them off, revealing the Sharingan, which was in its Mangekyo form in the shape of a three-sided pinwheel. Naruto, seeing he got to where he wanted, sighed as he got ready for whatever else Danzo had up his sleeve. You've lost, Danzo, face it. No, I will not die here, I will not be killed by a child such as you. Naruto sighed and held out his left hand, which started to gather Raiden to it, forming a yellow orb of lightning unlike the normal blue lightning. Holding his right hand out, he formed a perfect Rasengan. With those two done, he slammed them together, making the orb of lightning merge with Rasengan. It now looked just like a ball of chakra with lightning surrounding it while shooting off of it every now and then, however everyone could tell it was powerful. Placing a foot behind him, he shot off towards Danzo like a bullet, and before the old man could react, Naruto slammed his hands in Danzo's stoma. Raiden. Rasengan. Lightning release. Spiraling sphere. The attack sent lightning through his body, causing him to grit his teeth as he was blown off of his feet and straight into a slab of rock that was stuck up from the ground. So I see you can't use Izanagi with that eye, seeing as it's different from the others in your arm. Danzo chuckled as he stood up again with a burnt hole in his stomach while his robe was ripped to bits. Oh, I can, but that would mean I don't have this eye to use. It would be a bit of a waste now, wouldn't it? He asked rhetorically. Danzo, knowing he won't make it out alive, pulled back his robe and tore it off. I won't let you live, for the sake of Konoha. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at that. I'm the one saving it while you bring nothing but destruction, and you say you're saving it? Naruto asked, astonished at Danzo's comment. Danzo ignored the foolish boy and put his hands in a seal, and 4 diagrams appeared on his body before he shouted. Ura Shisho Fuinjutsu. Reverse 4 symbols sealing technique. Not a second later did his back explode as a black substance flew out in all directions before it started to wrap around Danzo. As this was happening, Danzo was starting to think back of his friendship with Sarutobi Hiruzen and how he failed to become Hokage like he always dreamed. Looking at Naruto between the small gaps in the black mass, he chuckled. With this you will die. Naruto, noticing the chakra levels rising highly, realized that this was not going to end good if he was close. Jumped back far, he held up his hands in a triangle where a black ball of gravity formed. Chibaku Tensai. Planetary devastation. With a mental command, he threw the ball in the air where it stopped above Danzo. He knew he was pushing it using such a jutsu when he'd only just activated the Rinnegan, but it was the only thing he could think of so quickly, and since he knew just what it did, it was probably the best action he could take. With another mental command, the orb of gravity began pulling parts of the earth towards it, Danzo included. I guess this is it, Danzo said with a sigh, prepared for what was to come. Everyone looked up at the giant ball of rock when all of a sudden black threads came out of the cracks before exploding, sending Naruto skidding back while everyone had to cover their eyes from the bits of rock and dust that was blew in their direction. When Naruto got up, still a little dazed, he looked to where Danzo had been stood before he was lifted up, only to see the commander of Root lying on his back with blood all over him and dead. Well, that's that taken care of, Naruto said with a sigh. Everyone hearing that started to cheer loudly for their hero of Konoha. Outside the village, about 10 miles away, a big plant-like creature came out of the ground. To think Pain would be defeated, the white side of Zetsu said. They had been hovering around Konoha for the past 2 days ever since Pain had been defeated. Danzo was also killed, along with that Sharingan of his. The black side of Zetsu finished. Tobi won't be pleased with all this, Zetsu said as he faded back into the tree. Council room. A couple hours later. In the council room, all the clan heads and daimyo sat around the table ready to discuss the new Hokage. Many were hoping for Naruto to become the new Hokage, but anything could happen in politics. It had been a couple hours since Naruto had killed Danzo, and since then they'd been sorting everything out whilst Naruto was healed by Sakura Haruno. It was at this time Naruto, Kakashi and Konan walked into the council room as they had been requested to show up as there were still things to discuss. "Good you're here, we have things to discuss," Hiashi said. He too would like Naruto as Hokage, as he had to admit that he was the strongest in the village right now. "What did you need us for?" Kakashi asked, who for once didn't have his book out. "We have called you here to discuss the position of the new Hokage," Shibi said, as he too found it logical for Naruto take his rightful place. "We as a whole would like to offer you, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the position you so rightfully deserve," the Fire Daimyo said, much to the shock of the three. What?" Naruto asked in shock. "You're the best choice for Hokage, pup," Sume said with a smirk. She knew how much Naruto wanted to be Hokage, so this was probably a shock to him. "You have the power for the position," Choza commented. "And the heritage, no one will disregard you," Inoichi said. "Never mind that everyone is practically in love with you. The villagers are cheering your very name right now," Shikaku said. "You are the student of Jiraiya-sama and Kakashi Hitaki. You defeated the one responsible for destroying the village. You managed to bring everyone back to life by changing Nagato's heart, and most of all you managed to uncover the rat that had been in this village, corrupting it." Naruto sighed and sat down in an empty seat to let his mind run through everything that was being offered to him. "What about Tsunade?" he asked the council. The Fire Daimyo waved his fan in his face. "Should she wake up from her condition, then you would still be Hokage. I, as well as everyone else here, understand the strength you truly hold. After seeing your battle with Danzo Shimura, displaying the Rinnegan, a dojutsu that the leader of Akatsuki has gifted you with, and your other amazing feats, you are the right person for the seat of Hokage," he said, since Naruto had explained a shortened version of how he gained the Rinnegan. "I see." Naruto gave a nod as he closed his now blue eyes. It was true after all. He could activate and deactivate the Rinnegan at any time. "We understand your reluctance since you are a Jinchuriki, and with being so young that this may feel like you are being tied down," Hiashi spoke up, catching Naruto's attention. "This village has made many mistakes, and I am ashamed to admit that I share some of the blame, but out of everything, you are the one thing that will save this village. Being Hokage has always been your dream. I think I can speak for everyone that right now, that this is the perfect time for you to follow in your father's footsteps and become the man we all know you can be." Naruto gave a nod in understanding. "I know that being Hokage has always been my dream, and I gained this strength so that I can protect my precious people and this village from people like Akatsuki and Orochimaru. But, I never imagined it would all be handed to me in a situation like this one," Naruto commented with a sigh. "But, I still need to train. I haven't mastered half of the jutsu I know now. As you know, I'm new to my Rinnegan and I still don't understand everything there is to it." Naruto, as he looked down at his sword tied to his waist. "I still need to find some way of contacting Hirenmaru." "My lord, you are giving a job of great importance to a child? But this is unheard of," one of the daimyo's advisors asked, shocked. "Kase no Kuni, Land of Wind, has done the same in Sanagakure no Sato, has it not? There were also rumors that this young man is responsible for the countless allegiances we have been receiving as of late, not to mention he is the child of Minato Namikaze. It would be great for Uzumaki-san to rise in this world as a political figurehead. He's already on a level that rivals Jiraiya. An S-rank warrior of one so young is hard to come by." The Fire Daimyo countered in a sagely manner. Most of the members seemed to nod at this. Even Naruto slightly. "Will you accept, Naruto Uzumaki? Or should we call you Hokage-sama?" asked the Fire Daimyo, standing up from his seat to walk over to Naruto. Naruto stilled and contemplated the situation. The moment he would stand up and extend his arm, he would become Hokage, the strongest of Konohagakure, the ideal figure of a shinobi. But if this was what was needed to protect the people, then so be it. This was what Yahiko, Nagato, Asuma-sensei, Ero Sennin, Hokage Oji-san and even Tsunade had fought for in their own way. This was his path to peace. With a small sigh he stood up and looked the daimyo in the eye. "I just want one thing. In 5 days, announce my succession in 5 days, I still have unfinished business to take care of." he requested of him. Meanwhile Kakashi and Konan, who had been stood at the back, smiled at the fact Naruto was one step closer to his dream. The daimyo smiled and gave a nod of acceptance. I understand and I accept your request. In 5 days, you will officially be the Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato. Naruto gave a nod and was about to leave when Shikaku stood up, catching his attention. Hokage-sama, with the time needed for reconstruction and repairs, we need your authorization to allow a construction company and the emergency provisions. Naruto nodded in understanding and quickly thought of what to do. There's a friend of mine from Nami no Kuni that happens to own a construction company. Send for them. Emergency provisions should be easy enough to obtain from Haru no Kuni. Just mention to them my name and they will comply. Naruto answered as he went out, followed by Kakashi and Konan. The fire daimyo smiled further. A great Hokage indeed.